All right. Welcome back, Max Doubles League. I'm very excited to finally be able to do this. I've been kind of sitting on this breakdown for a while. Had some other stuff going on, but I figured now might be a good time to get this out there since we got some new some new spectators in the server recently. Maybe hopefully give them a good taste of MDL before the next season 4 starts. And for the rest of you guys who are playing in season 3, I hope you guys enjoy this as well. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matt. I am the returning champion from MDL season 2, and as you may be able to surmise from the title, I also won this past season as well. So this breakdown is really just meant to be kind of a walk through my thoughts before and during the draft, constructing my team, and I'm going to be going chronologically through matches and transactions through the season, just like I did in my breakdown for season 2. So a lot of it is going to be the same style of content, the same sort of stuff. I'm going to spend a lot less time recapping the matches. It's more when I get to a match, it's going to be more about just my thoughts going into it, the prep and that kind of thing. Because you can see the replays here on this channel, on the Amoongus Burnouts channel, and we also did some breakdowns of the matches on Maxwell's channel every week. So so it's more going to be about my thoughts going into that stuff. So let's get started with the draft. Very beginning of the season. What am I looking to draft? My first pick, a lot of as with any other draft, you're probably going to be building around your first pick. So that's mostly what I was thinking about in the beginning. I had some idea of the direction I wanted to take it with a few of these potential first picks, but anyway, so what I really wanted to do with my first pick more than anything was just pick up something that I'm not that familiar with. Maybe it's something I've never drafted before. Maybe it's something I'm just really curious about. Maybe it's something that I don't really know how it works in a Dynamax format. Maybe it's something that I think has some untapped potential, at least in MDL, something like that. So I'm really looking to figure out a new style of team. Especially because I don't feel like I really need to optimize my draft the way that I have in past drafts, MDL or otherwise. I felt like having won a championship already, I was freed up to do more of what I wanted to do rather than what I felt like I had to do. A lot of the time, if you're if you're in the first half of the draft, something really good falls to you, but it's not really something that you want. Maybe it's not something that you're interested in. You might feel like you have to pick it because it's the obvious choice. It's the best thing on the board. It's the best Pokemon available. I wasn't really going by that this time because I didn't really feel like I had to. I was comfortable if I was slightly less optimized, but got to use something that I was interested in trying. So that was kind of my goal here. It wasn't all about optimization and making the best possible teams. It was the team that, or maybe just the Pokemon that I wanted to use. So I was 7th in the draft order. So for my first pick, I just made a list of the top 7 Mons that I was interested in. Celesteela being the first. And I figured, worst case scenario, if all 6 people before me pick everything off of this list, I'm at least guaranteed one thing that I'm interested in trying out. Now, as you guys probably know, Celesteela was available when it got there, so I ended up picking up that. It was Celesteela. I felt like. I felt it was just it was out of all of the best tier 1s, it was the one I was least familiar with, at least in Generation 8. I have a history with Celesteela in Generation 7, but it was very different back then. The format was very different, really just because Dynamax didn't exist at the time. So it was, Celesteela was, occasionally you saw an offensive Celesteela, maybe something with a Life Orb or Assault Vest or something, special attack booster with Beast Boost, whatever. Most of the time, especially in 17, you were just seeing these stall sets that were boosting defense or special defense, protect, heavy slam, leech seed, flamethrower, something like that. But I felt like that wasn't. You could probably still use that here and there in Generation 8, but it's not really what Celesteela is anymore. And I had next to no experience with Celesteela in Generation 8. I tried to build a Series 7 team for VGC that had that kind of stall leech seed Celesteela on it. I just put ground and steel coverage on it for defense and special defense boosts for maxing, but it was really just bulky and meant to stall. And frankly, in a Dynamax format, it didn't really work very well. So I wanted to try it out with a different kind of team comp, and one that worked a little bit better for offensive Celesteela. And offensive Celesteela is nice because you can, like I said, you can run physical or special. It's got the stats for both. It does have, it has good coverage for both as well, actually. It has some of the weirdest coverage combinations in the game, but it's also just one of the weirdest Pokemon in the game, so that makes sense. You can run stall sets. It's an option, which I like having that option there in draft, even if it's not optimal in Generation 8 Dynamax kind of format. With the sweeping sets, especially when you're Dynamaxing it, it has a lot of potential for offense, bulk, and speed all at once, which you rarely get in the same mon. But Celesteela has a stat distribution that allows for it, a typing that allows for it. It's got really nice bulk with an incredible defensive typing. Steel and Flying's amazing. And it's got Stab, Max Airstream. It's got Beast Boost to help you boost up your attack or special attack. And you can kind of build it with a combination of speed and bulk, and you can get the best of every one of those worlds, especially if you have the right support for it. So it seemed like something really interesting, something that I wanted to figure out, something with a lot of versatility and power. So I was very happy to have picked this thing up. And this was also part of the reason this was my first choice out of everything on the board, was because I actually had a pretty solid idea of what I wanted the team composition with Celesteela to look like. The number one partner I wanted for it was Raichu, or really any Lightning Rod user, but Raichu was ideal. I really wanted a Rain mode because Celesteela with Lightning Rod and with Rain, those are two things that support it defensively really well. It covers both weaknesses. You're drawing in electric attacks with the Lightning Rod, and you're weakening fire attacks with the Rain mode. So if you play it correctly and position yourself well enough, you can essentially make it so Celesteela has no weaknesses. And this was also the season where, against my advice, the league decided to put, or at least the admins decided to put, Pelipper and Ludicolo in Tier 3, which I thought was a terrible idea. So I also thought that since I'm looking at a potential team comp that works really well with Rain, this is the time to exploit that. So that was the next item on the Celesteela list. Next was adding a ground type to the team. Not only to be able to Earthquake next to Celesteela, and hopefully Pelipper, with Tier 2 Politoed as a backup, I guess, but Pelipper is really the one that I wanted to go for. I really wanted a solid ground type, just for offensive synergy against Celesteela, because it just covers both weaknesses that Celesteela has. Electric and fire are both weak to ground. Seems like a no-brainer to put a solid, powerful, reliable ground type next to Celesteela. And the last thing I wanted was a solid Prankster user with both Fake Tears to support the special Celesteela set and speed control, because Celesteela It does need a little bit of extra speed control compared to some faster stuff if you want to go for a faster variant, because it only has that base 61 speed. So, a max airstream is going to help, but it's not going to make you outspeed the fastest stuff in the format. You need a little bit of extra help. You need some kind of Thunder Wave, Tailwind, Icy Wind, something like that. So I wanted to. I was thinking about a Prankster user in that last slot for the team composition. So moving forward in round 2, I got that first piece, the Lightning Rod. I thought this was the most important one to pick up immediately in round 2. Partially because I suspected Ryan might have been going for it. He was picking after me on the even-numbered rounds. I believe he did want the Raichu, and it's great with Celesteela. Lightning Rod, obviously, that's the main point of it next to Celesteela, but it has a lot of other stuff it can do for Celesteela and for and with a lot of the other stuff that I wanted to use on the team. Volt Switch Weakness Policy combination was something I had in mind. That's something that was used pretty frequently with Celesteela in Series 7 and 9 in VGC, so I felt like that was an obvious mode I could go with. Raichu in general, it's also a mon that I've never actually drafted before, and I was excited to use it because I think it has a lot of versatility in its support. Can support the team both offensively and defensively. Offensively, it has speed control options like Nuzzle and Electroweb. Nuzzle especially is just so good. I use that so much. It's an amazing move, especially with how fast Raichu is. So with those speed control options and just tossing a helping hand on there from time to time, it actually has decent offensive support options, and I think it has even better defensive support options because it gets screens, it gets Charm and Eerie Impulse, a lot of stuff like that. Really fast Fake Out. It's got a really broad toolkit, and it can even do some damage too. Since I was trying to go for a rain mode after the Raichu, having stab putting an electric type on your team when you're going to be using a rain mode is always nice, because you just have that stab thunder as an option, which I ended up using a couple of times. So that was nice too. So Raichu, very important piece for this team composition I was going for. Round 3, I reached all the way down to tier 3 for Pelipper, because I actually thought it was pretty important to get early, especially with Celesteela. And now I have that defensive kind of core with the Celesteela plus Lightning Rod and Drizzle. So and I really like Pelipper as the Drizzle mon. Like Politoed is good. They serve different purposes, but I really like Pelipper, especially for the flying coverage, because that's something that you're gonna need on a rain mode a lot of the time. It's the reason that Kingdra having access to Hurricane in this generation is so good. You really want to be you want to have something to hit opposing grass types, because that's something that your rain mode is going to struggle with, being that Swift Swimmers are typically water types. So I absolutely love that. Tailwind is also a big draw for Pelipper. That's pretty self-explanatory. Don't really need to go into that. I also had my eye on Soak. Pelipper doesn't really have a super deep move pool, but Soak is one really interesting thing that I wanted to potentially try. And I also noticed that if you Scarf Pelipper and make a Ludicolo very slow but still have Swift Swim on it, your pair can still be very fast, but Pelipper the Scarf Pelipper can actually outspeed Ludicolo in rain and soak stuff before you go for grass attacks. And it's also great with the Raichu, because you can soak, again, you need a Scarf on it, because Raichu definitely wants to go fast, but it's great with Raichu, because you have those Stab Thunders, like I mentioned, Soak plus Thunder. That's a pretty cool combo. I thought that, like I mentioned, Pelipper and Ludicolo both being in tier 3, I think was a big mistake on our part, and I fully intended to to exploit that. So it's just insanely good value down there in tier 3. So big part of why I wanted it. And I also felt like I needed to reach for Rain relatively early, just in case somebody else wanted Rain. Pelipper was the only option left by the time it got to me in round 3, because Hunter had already taken Politoed. I know there was some talk about him potentially sniping Politoed from me. I wanted Pelipper all along, so that was fine. It just made my my need for Pelipper a little bit greater, and I needed to grab it a little bit quicker, just because it was the only other Drizzle Pokemon on the board. So felt like I needed to reach for it pretty early, even though it was way down in tier 3. Round 4, here comes my ground type. This was my ideal ground type. I toyed with the idea of maybe trying Garchomp in tier 1, but I also felt like I'm not really... I don't really like Garchomp that much, and I really wondered whether it was worth a tier 1 slot. I think by round 4 it may have already been gone. Dan may have already snatched it up. I'm not really sure exactly when he grabbed it, but it didn't really matter. I didn't really want it. Diggersby was... I felt like... well, first of all, I mean, like I mentioned before, hits fire and electric types for Celesteela. That's really the main reason I wanted a ground type. But and then, of course, I've got a lot of flying types on this team, 2 so far, but there are more to come. So being able to Earthquake next to those, especially as mons like Pelipper set Tailwind, is pretty nice. Diggersby... the reason I wanted Diggersby in particular, there's some decent ground types in tier 2. You've got stuff like Mudsdale, Rhyperior. Those were a little bit too slow for me. Nidoqueen, Nidoking. I wanted something more physical, something that was going to have more powerful earthquakes, which Nidoqueen and Nidoking can do, but they're not nearly as powerful as something like Diggersby. There's also Mamoswine, which we'll talk about that later. I have a lot of things to say about Mamoswine. But Diggersby just has incredible coverage, and it hits really hard. It's the hardest hitting ground type in tier 2. I think we've talked about this a couple of times in the server, but its attack stat when you factor in huge power is actually slightly higher than Landorus T's, which is kind of nuts. And the coverage is just great. It gets all the elemental punches. It gets poison coverage, steel, dark. It even gets bounce if you want to use max airstream, which I had 1 week. Didn't actually click it, but it was there on the set. So yeah, in terms of coverage, any mon with good damage output and great coverage is going to be good in draft. Just how it works. Round 5. I actually went back up to tier 1 for this one. Mostly because there were some prankster mons in other tiers that started to get snatched up. I think Liepard was gone by this point. If I was going to grab another prankster user, it probably would have been Liepard, I believe, down to tier 2. But I was a little bit concerned that somebody else with a tier 1 slot might have wanted to grab the Grimmsnarl, because it looked pretty good with a couple other team comps. I may have been it was probably safe to leave it until the end, but it just looked like such a good piece, especially with what I wanted to grab next, that I felt like I needed to snatch it up instead of being one of those people who lets their tier 1 slot go till the end or almost the end. It was just a little bit too important for that. Grimmsnarl's just it's an amazing prankster user. It has an ideal typing for prankster users. I love dark type prankster users because it can't get fucked with by other prankster users because it's dark type and it's immune, which makes it immune to prankster. And then also fairy type pranksters like Whimsicott or Klefki or something like that. They're really nice because while they can't use their prankster moves against dark types, they've got that super effective fairy coverage and stab fairy coverage rather, and Grimmsnarl actually has a very respectable attack stat, so it can actually hit some dark types decently hard, which I did a couple of times this season. Like Raichu, it's got great offensive and defensive support. It has 2 forms of speed control in Scary Face and Thunder Wave, both of which I used. I liked that it had both options, kind of kept your opponent guessing. Fake Tears obviously is great support for your offensive modes, and screens as well for your defensive modes. And I felt like that combination worked really, really well with Celesteela because, like I said, it's able to do speed, offense, and bulk all at once, and Grimmsnarl helps with all of that, even better than Raichu does, because of that prankster. So, really, really nice prankster user to pair with Celesteela and really with the rest of the team going forward as well. Grimmsnarl is also viable offensively. It's got like I said, 120 base attack. This is the one mon on that I used this season on my draft that I have actually drafted before, not an MDL, but I've used it in MBC, and I actually ended up we Dynamaxed it like 3 times throughout the season. Offensive Grimmsnarl is something that a lot of people don't really expect, and it's actually very viable. So it's another way that Grimmsnarl is super versatile and keeps your opponent guessing. And going back to support, it has a couple other tools like taunt and tricks, stuff like that. That's not just like it's more utility rather than always being offensive or defensive support. That its move pool is just super deep, whether you're running a prankster set or an offensive set. Lots of different prankster options, and its type coverage is actually pretty crazy too. It's gets all the elemental punches, gets ground moves, fighting coverage, grass coverage. There's a lot. It's got a lot of coverage. It's pretty good. So love Grimmsnarl. Going in around 6, I wanted a powerful dragon type. Regidrago was something that I was exposed to in MBC. Was not something that was really ever on my radar before seeing our good buddies Ben and Vishy using it in MBC. But it's a pretty powerful dragon type. I was using it to finish my core, my Fairy Dragon Steel core with alongside Celesteela and Grimmsnarl. And it's just there for absolutely massive damage. And with the kind of speed control that I have on this team, Tailwind from Pelipper, Airstream from Celesteela, Nuzzle Electroweb from Raichu, Scary Face Thunderwave from Grimmsnarl. I got a lot of speed control in this team already. Regidrago really benefits from that because it wants to move first. It wants to just blow you up with a big dragon energy. And it's really good at doing that. So it's something that I wanted to try. I've never used it myself before, and after seeing its success in another league, it was something that I was very interested in. So, and it fit nicely with what I was going for so far. So that's pretty much my main team composition right there. I kind of stopped with the Grimmsnarl there. If we go back to the plan for my team composition here, boom, Lightning Rod, ideally Raichu, got it. Rain Mode, Pelipper, Ludicolo. I don't have the Ludicolo yet, but nobody's sniping the Ludicolo from me. The guy with Politoed has already got a Swift Swim user. Nobody else has Drizzle. Nobody's sniping Ludicolo. So I'm going to get it. Reliable, powerful ground type, got it. That's Diggersby. Prankster with Fake Tears and Speed Control, got it. That's Grimmsnarl. So I got everything I wanted. And then I started adding some stuff to that with starting with the Regidrago. After that, moving into round 7, around the middle of the draft, I started looking at the lower tiers, kind of thinking about what I might want to grab. You know, I know that one of my tier 3 spots is going to be Ludicolo, but I got to think about what's my other tier 3, what are my tier 4s going to be, what's my tier 5. So I started looking through all of those tiers, and I noticed something in tier 5 that I think we kind of glossed over a little bit when we were forming the tier list, and that is that Sawk is in tier 5. And Sawk is a little bit too valuable for that tier. I felt like it was okay to reach down this far, even though I still had 2 tier 3 slots and 2 tier 4 slots to fill up. When you see something like this that you think is an oversight, it's a good idea to reach for it a little bit early, especially if you don't really need anything else from these other lower tier slots. I got everything I need. I know I'm getting Ludicolo. It's fine. So I felt like it was appropriate to reach for the Sawk before somebody else snatched it up. It's like it actually has decent stats for a tier 5, 125 base attack with 85 speed. That's pretty good. It's got the typical, I didn't have a fighting type before. It's got the typical coverage that a fighting type offers you, rock and ground and elemental punches and that kind of thing. Usually you get a choice between either like Iron Head or Poison Jab, maybe both. Sawk here just has Poison Jab, no steel coverage, unfortunately, but that's all right, not a big deal. But the main draw of Sawk, I thought, was Inner Focus with Coaching. It's got a couple of good abilities. Mold Breaker is okay. I wasn't expecting to use it ever. Sturdy is a nice backup ability if you're not expecting to get faked out or intimidated. But Inner Focus is just such a nice, just incredible insurance against fake out, because you're probably, if you're using it for coaching, a lot of the time you want to put a scarf on it. I wanted to use coaching primarily with Celesteela, but there's some other physical attackers here that could use it as well. You don't need a scarf to outspeed the Celesteela, but you might want the scarf to outspeed some of the things on your opponent's team, so you can make sure the Sawk gets the move off and you get a defense boost on Celesteela before something physical might hit it, or whatever Maximon you're using coaching with. So the scarf is preferred, but doesn't always have to be there. It's if I'm using coaching, it's probably going to have the scarf on it though. So it's just a great way to get your entire mode off without worrying about fake out on either mon, because you got Inner Focus here, and the thing that you're using coaching on is maxing. So I thought it was especially valuable for that. And then its offensive capabilities were honestly a little bit secondary, but still worth noting. So I'm glad I picked that up before somebody else realized how valuable that thing was in tier 5. Really should have been a tier 4, and I believe it's going to be now in this upcoming season. Going into round 8, I figured I'm getting my Ludicolo in that last tier 3 slot. I would like to have a fire type. There were some steel types in particular that I was a little bit worried about. I was hard pressed to find a really good fire type. Salazzle was kind of it. I didn't really want to have to settle for it, but like it seemed okay. I didn't have a poison type either. It helps with speed tiers. It's 117 base speed, I believe, so it would be the fastest thing on my draft so far. It's got some fast offense and disruption options. It's got like taunt and encore and thunder wave, so it can do some cool stuff. I also kind of liked the idea of trying to go for a stall Celesteela set with corrosion toxic, so I could use the Salazzle to kind of toxic some poison or especially steel types that are going to be really bulky and really difficult to break through, and then kind of use a bulky boosting Celesteela to leech seed stuff and just stall the opponent down while they're going down to toxic. So wasn't really something I expected to be super good or expected to be a common part of my a common strategy on my part, but it was a fun idea that I had. But Salazzle not really an essential part of the team. Just kind of it had some cool stuff. It was a fire type to kind of form a fire water grass core with the rain mode. So that's about it. Next up, I discovered Archeops in Tier 4. I was really looking for a fast Tailwind setter. I wanted Crobat earlier, but Hunter managed to grab it pretty early. That was the one like real snipe of the draft for me, was losing Crobat. And Archeops was kind of a budget replacement for that. 110 base speed's pretty good, not as fast as you would want, but it's still pretty good. It's got a very fast Tailwind, and it's I felt like it was a good option, like a budget option down there in Tier 4 as kind of a replacement for the Crobat. I think, honestly, if I had noticed the Archeops in Tier 4 earlier, I probably would have picked it in round 8 and saved Salazzle for a little bit later, because it really seemed almost essential for some of the stuff that I was trying to do. I really wanted Tailwind, fast Tailwind, especially for like Diggersby and Regidrago. So this was my way of doing that. As far as support and disruption options go, it has a surprisingly deep move pool. Tailwind obviously is the main form of support, but it it also has some utility stuff like taunt and like ally switch, and it even has Endeavor, which is technically an attack, but it's sort of I would view it kind of the same way I would view like a Screech or a Fake Tears. Like it's sort of like offensive support. It's letting your offensive mode sweep a little bit better because you're bringing something down to really low HP, ideally, depending on where you're at, and then allowing something else to just pick it off. And it's with all of those support options, Endeavor included, it's fully functional regardless of its ability. Obviously, Defeatist is terrible. This Pokemon would be actually really good given its stats if it didn't have Defeatist. That's really it's just the thing holding it back, obviously. And but if you get it in on the field safely, it actually has potential for pretty high damage just with the obvious risk of Defeatist. And you can actually run it physical or special. It has good stats for both. Usually you see it physical just because the physical attack stat's higher, but it actually can do both, surprisingly. So it's an option there, even though Defeatist makes it not so great. After that, the last mon before I picked up the Ludicolo was the Galarian Rapidash. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with this slot. I was looking through Tier 4, and I felt like most of it was pretty garbage. Rapidash, Galarian form or not, I felt like both Rapidash forms have some kind of potential in draft. I don't think they're really that good. They have like 100 base attack with 105 base speed. It's good speed stat. They actually have surprising coverage, but I feel like they would both be like really solid mons if they just had some kind of ability that like boosted their damage or something like that. They're just a little bit too mediocre stat wise, even though they have a really nice speed and a usable attack stat. But what really drew me to Rapidash at first was that it was a fast heal pulse user. I figured, this could be an extra piece of the puzzle that helps bulky Celesteela do what it wants to do. It doesn't really have a healing move itself, kind of has to rely on Leech Seed, maybe Leftovers if you want to slap that on there. But Rapidash is, I believe, the fastest heal pulse in the game aside from Latias. So I figured I could, cheese something out with that. Maybe it might be fun, who knows. It is so far my only Trick Room setter on the team, which is kind of funny considering it's a garbage mon with high base speed. And I don't really have a Trick Room mode here anyway, even with a Trick Room user. It's more often if I put Trick Room on the set, it's probably more often going to be used for Imprison Trick Room to stop my opponent's Trick Room. even then, it's like you click Imprison Trick Room with the Galarian Rapidash. What does it do after that? Who knows? It's kind of a weird mon. It can probably do some stuff, but I don't know. Spoiler alert, I ended up dropping it pretty quick, but I thought it was at least decent for tier 4 in terms of speed, offense, and coverage. It's definitely not something that's high value enough to be put into a higher tier. It definitely belongs in tier 4, that's for sure. But it's, interesting and potentially kind of good for tier 4. That's about it. And then finally, round 11, we got the Ludicolo. Yeah, it's my Rain Sweeper. It's being paired with Pelipper, obviously. Very high value in tier 3, just like the Pelipper. I feel like the flying coverage on Pelipper and the grass coverage on Ludicolo are really perfect for a rain mode. It allows you to hit basically anything that your big water type attacks don't hit. Ideally you want to just you want to get the rain up, you want to get your Swift Swim Sweeper in, you want to probably Dynamax it and just use some really powerful rain boosted stab water attacks, right? So the trick here was to cover for everything that resists water, basically. So you got the flying stab to cover for grass types. You got the grass stab to cover for water types, and in case you're running into any dragons, both of them happen to have ice coverage. So you're kind of covering all of your bases there. You got neutral and or super effective water stab to hit everything else aside from those types that resist water. So having that type combination for a rain mode is just absolutely perfect. And like I said, I saved this thing for the last round because nobody really had any good reason to snipe it. There was Hunter with Politoed Kingdra. If he took Ludicolo, it would have been just filling another slot with something he kind of already had. I guess it would give him a little bit of versatility because he's got grass coverage on his Swift Swim Sweeper, but he's better off going for something else, and he did go for some other stuff to round out his draft a little more, so that was, I think, the right decision on his part. Nobody else really had any reason to snipe it from me because I had the only other Drizzle user. I guess there might have been a couple people with some Prankster mons that could have used Prankster Rain Dance with the Ludicolo, but it didn't seem very likely. So, and you know what? Even if somebody did snipe it from me, it would be easy to just make a quick adjustment. I would do one of two things. I would either grab something else in tier 3 and then drop either that or Salazzle or excuse me, I would just draft a different Swift Swim Sweeper, which would be kind of lame because Ludicolo is clearly the best one that was available. There were some other ones like, I don't know, Dreadnought, Kabutops. Those were not really too exciting for me. I think the most likely thing that I would have done was just find something else that was good in tier 3 and then just scrap the rain mode, just drop Pelipper as soon as I could. So would have been an easy adjustment. Wouldn't have been great because I did really want this rain mode, but God, the likelihood of somebody taking Ludicolo was just it just wasn't happening, and it didn't. So got what I wanted there. So that's my entire draft. Got my Celesteela comp, everything I wanted there with a few filler mons down near the bottom. But as far as I'm concerned, this was an excellent draft for me. I was very happy with this. The only thing that I was really not happy about was the Crobat, but I sort of patched that up as best I could. Crobat was really just there for a really fast, reliable Tailwind. That's the thing it does best, obviously. And that was going to be really, really good for Diggersby and Regidrago in particular. Tailwind with a big Earthquake from Diggersby, Tailwind with just spread Dragon energy from the Drago. They both really benefit from that. Crobat also offers some weakness policy combinations. It's got some interesting coverage for activating, like if you want to go for like an offensive weakness policy Grimmsnarl, you can just poke it with a light, poison move. You can even go for a grass move into like a weakness policy Diggersby or something. It's got a couple options for that. And it also really supplements Grimmsnarl's support really well because it offers some extra stuff that Grimmsnarl doesn't. Tailwind being the main one. Grimmsnarl has speed control options, of course, but Tailwind is just a better move, a better speed control move than really anything else. Aside from Trick Room, I guess, if we're talking speed control in general. But it also offers fast weather moves, Sunny Day and Rain Dance. On this team, you're not using Sunny Day; it's mostly just the Rain Dance. But Grimmsnarl, a lot of Prankstermons get those moves, but Grimmsnarl actually does not. So Crobat supplements that a little bit. Like I said, better speed control, and non-prankster taunt is actually kind of important in case you want to taunt taunt something in psychic terrain, taunt something when Serena's on the field, taunt a dark type. Having that flexibility is nice. The Coffagrigus and the Snorlax was also something that I would call a semi-snipe, partial snipe. It's not really something that I was... I had the idea of going with this mode about halfway through the draft. I was sort of considering it. I never really settled on it fully, but the Snorlax ended up going to Hunter, and the Coffagrigus ended up going to Dan, so just something that I kind of scrapped, didn't really worry about it. I felt like I got everything I needed, no problem. But I felt like it was a pretty intriguing Trick Room mode. I like the Ghost and Normal types together, especially when one of them's got Ally Switch. And I've never used either of these Mons before. I felt like Snorlax might be difficult to use on a team without redirection, which is what I had. That was one of the things that one of the rules that I made for myself. In addition to drafting something, at least drafting something in the first round that I was not familiar with, I was limiting myself to not drafting any kind of Follow Me or Rage Powder user. So it's probably not a big deal that I didn't get the Snorlax here because it's much, much better when you have that option. But it was pretty high value, I thought, in Tier 2. I think Snorlax, with the G-Max form, is something that a lot of people will just kind of shove into Tier 1 because we've all seen what it does in VGC, at least or like early VGC 2020. It's just terrifying when it's able to get up a Belly Drum and Dynamax with G-Max Replenish. It's just incredibly bulky, +6 attack, gets its berries back, and it's very hard to deal with. So I think a lot of it's maybe even worth putting in Tier 1. But even if it belongs in Tier 2, it's still very good for Tier 2. So that's kind of why I was interested in that. But not really a big deal. Crobat was kind of a big deal. Anyway, moving into my first week. So, did not change anything in that little post-draft 24-hour trade period that we had. This was my my entire team going into week 1. The main mode here that I was using against Hunter in the first week was this sort of the standard Celesteela Grimmsnarl thing that I planned on from the start. Just the special Celesteela. It was my main Dynamax option. I had the Fake Tears and Thunder Wave from the Grimmsnarl. Pretty straightforward as to what this thing does. And I thought Celesteela would be especially hard to take down here, because if you look at Hunter's team, you're going to notice, try to find what he hits Celesteela with. He's got an electric type with Vikavolt. He's got a little bit of electric coverage. He might run Thunder Punch on Metagross, Thunder Punch on Snorlax. He's got a little bit of fire coverage. If he wants to bring Wigglytuff, I guess, it gets Flamethrower, Fire Punch on Scrafty or Snorlax. His fire coverage is not that great, especially since Metagross does not get Fire Punch. So I figured with his limited fire coverage and with a Wackenberry and with a rather solid game plan against his Rain mode, Celesteela was going to be really, really hard to take down. If he led with Politoed Kingdra, all I really had to do was go with the Thunder Wave Fake Tears combo. If I just went for Airstream and Thunder Wave on turn 1, I would outspeed Kingdra the following turn, and then I could just Fake Tears Airstream it again, and it's done. So that was my plan there. So I figured Celesteela was going to be really hard for him to deal with, given the way that I prepped that mode. And then the Diggersby and the Raichu were typically my two Mons in the back if I'm going with that mode. Raichu just for some extra support against the electric types if he burns my Wackenberry. Pretty standard moveset from the Raichu. Diggersby as well, pretty standard. It's just there for excuse me. It's just there for good damage into Metagross, especially. Metagross is one of the things I was most concerned about because I didn't really have a way to deal with it immediately. But standard rock and ground coverage and superpower just for the Snorlax. These last two mons here were kind of niche mons for specific modes. I will. I'll talk about the Archeops first. This was the main thing I was doing with the Archeops here was Scarf Rock Blast, which I kind of hated, but it was sort of the only way I could deal with like a really solid Crobat Metagross lead, especially if he was going for self-weakness policy activation with like Astonish or Bite or something alongside Tailwind. That was a big problem for me. At that point, I would have had to rely on like spreading paralysis a lot, or I would have to rely on the Scarf Archeops getting at least 3 hits on Rock Blast, because 2 hits won't do it. Getting at least 3 hits on Rock Blast and one-shotting a potentially Focus Sash Crobat before it can actually do anything. So that was what I was most concerned about going into this match, and I dedicated an entire slot to stopping that mode because that's how terrified of it I was. And then, good old Dragon Ball here in the bottom right. This thing just hits incredibly hard. The Trick Room mode was a bit of a concern. I don't really have a Trick Room mode of myself. I felt pretty comfortable operating in Trick Room in most matchups. But this one was a little bit awkward considering his potential for getting Trick Room off and having Belly Drum Snorlax in Trick Room. Because mostly my answer to opposing Trick Room modes is, well, Celesteela is really bulky, it's got a great defensive typing, I have a lot of support for it. Even if they're in Trick Room, they're not going to be able to break through it. That's not really going to work here if Snorlax is at +6 and he has Trick Room up. So I don't really like it, but my main answer to Trick Room is stopping Trick Room from even going up. And that's what the Regidrago was for. It was just really, really big spread damage in case he wanted to lead Redirection with Trick Room, because he does have that Amoonguss. And I also have Helping Hand on Raichu. That was what I figured I would probably end up leading next to Regidrago if I felt like I had to do that. Just for the Helping Hand, because Helping Hand specs Dragon Energy was the only way to guarantee a one-shot on like a very specially defensive Amoonguss. So going into team preview, I noticed a few things. Number one, the thing that I'm most afraid of was the Crobat Metagross. There is no Crobat here. That was a giant relief for me. Even though it kind of means that I'm going into this with like a 5-mon team because no Crobat means no Archeops, but that's pretty okay. I was comfortable with the rest of the 5 going into pretty much anything else he had if there was no Crobat. Just to be clear, I wasn't planning on leading Archeops in game 1 at all, even if he had Crobat. It was more just in case I really couldn't handle the Crobat mode, I would lead Archeops potentially in a game 2 or 3. But I also noticed there's a Kingdra here with no Politoed, which was strange. I get that he was going for crit sniper stuff. Maybe the idea here was Rage Powder with Focus Energy and then max the Kingdra. That would have been cool. But it didn't seem that great to me, and I was pleased to see that he didn't have just that hyper-offensive rain mode right off the bat. I actually wasn't thinking about crit Kingdra in Team Preview at all, but looking at it now, of course, it has the scope lens. And the last thing I noticed that really stuck out to me was that 4 out of 6 of these Mons are meant to function in Trick Room. Behemoth, Amoonguss, Snorlax, Vikavolt, that's hard Trick Room, man. Even Metagross can function in Trick Room, kind of. Depends on it's a little bit weird since it's naturally faster than Celesteela, and I didn't know what the speed stats were like. But I was looking at this going, okay, there's way too much Trick Room here to not use Regidrago. And then, well, what happened. I think we all remember this match. Game 1 led Regidrago. It did Regidrago things, got a double KO immediately, and maxed it on red HP, which was kind of nuts, but somehow worked. And then Game 2, I figured, you know what, after getting bopped by the Dragon Ball that hard, there's no way he doesn't pivot to a Metagross mode in Game 2. So I went back to my original mode, which handles Metagross decently well. It was a little bit awkward because I didn't have anything to like immediately address Metagross. But I'm able to spread paralysis pretty well. I've got some big ground type damage against it with Diggersby. I've got Flamethrower on Celesteela. If I get a couple of Beast Boosts, I can do pretty big damage to it. I was actually able to one-shot it. After it took some Life Orb damage, I was able to get the one-shot on Max Metagross with +2 Max Flare, so that was pretty good. And so my adjustment there, expecting him to pivot to Metagross, worked out really well. It was a pretty clean Celesteela sweep with a little help from the Grimmsnarl there, so pretty good. Going into the Week 1 transaction, so I'm not going to give all of my thoughts on Mamoswine here quite yet, but I thought that Mamoswine was just the better ground type into a lot of what I was going up against in the next couple of weeks. The ice typing I thought helped against a variety of different things, and having Oblivious, it is immune to Intimidate, and I was expected to go up against Jess with her Incineroar the following week, and then my next match after that would be Dan with Arcanine, so a couple of big Intimidators there where I would probably need a ground type to hit that fire type. That's the whole reason I put a ground type in that slot alongside Celesteela. So the Intimidate immunity was pretty big. It has Thick Fat as a secondary ability, which I used a couple of times. It's actually turned out to be a little bit useful, at least in this upcoming week. But the main draw was, the ice coverage and the immunity to Intimidate. Not just ice coverage, because Diggersby has that, but Stab Ice seemed pretty good. Ice, in general, is just very good offensively. So, next up, with the Mamoswine, we have my matchup against Jess. Whoops. All right, matchup against Jess here with the new Mamoswine trade. So, this one definitely had me a bit concerned. I've played Jess a number of times. Our matches are always very they're very heated. They're very close. I never feel comfortable going up against her. This week was I felt like I had a better matchup on paper than I did against some of her teams in past seasons. My main goal here really was to I was using the same kind of mode with Celesteela. I believe it's the exact same Celesteela set except for the EVs. Protector / flamethrower flash cannon, right? Yes, protect. Yeah, okay. So, I felt a little bit weird using the exact same thing twice in a row. I changed the EVs around, of course, because I needed different to outspeed different things with my airstream boosts. But it just looked optimal here. My main goal really was to sweep with Celesteela. One of the things I was most afraid of was this hail mode with the Arctozolt in particular. And I also really wanted to work on mitigating physical damage because her team is just so overwhelmingly physical. The only two real special attackers here are Vanillux and Slowbro, and I wasn't even really very concerned about Slowbro. Dragonite can be a special attacker, but like, it's not great. I think she may have used special Dragonite like once or twice ever. I wasn't really too worried about it. So I had a lot of ways to mitigate physical damage. I had Steel Spikes from Celesteela, Coaching from Sawk, Charm on Raichu, Reflect on Grimmsnarl. It was that made things quite a bit easier, especially in our second game. So I also had this interesting Mamoswine set here as kind of a backup lead. This was sort of I liked it in the back with the main Celesteela lead. Raichu is also a very likely lead for me here as well, just because I was terrified of the Arctozolt, so I kind of wanted extra insurance with Lightning Rod and Wackenberry. But Mamoswine and Sawk looked like a good back pair, and it also looked like a good alternate lead, just in case the hail mode really broke through my Celesteela. The Thick Fat gives it a very positive hail matchup. It basically resists ice, since ice is normally neutral. Thick Fat gives me a resistance to it. The Scarf Sawk, I believe I made it Jolly. It was actually able to outspeed Arctozolt in Hail, so I was able to get my Coaching boost up before Arctozolt could do anything. And I was being immune to the Electric Stab, and having the resistance to Ice with Thick Fat on Mamoswine was really nice. Weakness policy was there, partially because I think Arctozolt gets some steel coverage, so having +1 defense with weakness policy would have been nice there. I also knew that Jess kind of had to tech some fire moves on a couple of mons, like Fire Punch on maybe Dragonite or Rhyperior, or like Flamethrower on Slowbro, something like that, for the Celesteela. Otherwise, she's sort of she's probably a little bit overly reliant on the Incineroar for hitting Celesteela for fire damage. And I felt like Mamoswine could take advantage of that because it's basically not weak to... It's neutral against fire with the Thick Fat, but weakness policy still activates on... it's still considered super effective when it's hit by a fire move. So that's pretty good. The Incineroar matchup was a little bit weird. You would... The switch to Thick Fat with this like weakness policy and Coaching kind of mode was a bit of a last-minute change. Oblivious just seems so obvious to me, and I had Oblivious Mamoswine on here for a good while. but I started thinking that I was a little bit more concerned with the Hail mode in particular than I was with getting intimidated by Incineroar. And trading Oblivious for Thick Fat just gives me an advantage, a different kind of advantage against Incineroar. It removes the super effective fire hit, but I do get intimidated. But at the same time, if I'm using the Scarf Coaching, I can't get faked out, of course, with the Inner Focus. And the coaching basically negates the Intimidate immediately. So I thought that was pretty good. It was worth switching to Thick Fat for that, even though Oblivious is just it's the obvious thing here. And I had I kind of tacked on this Archeops set mostly because it just seemed fun, and it was also this weird obscure tier 4 Pokemon that somehow was able to one-shot both of her tier 1s. It's Power Meteor Beam, it definitely gets Incineroar unless it's I don't know, like Chardy Berry or something, which like why? And then Heat Wave, of course, for the Kartana, and Archeops being 1 point faster is pretty good for that. And then of course just Tailwind, because Tailwind is very good for a lot of this stuff. I definitely wanted speed control for Celesteela and Mamoswine in particular being my max options here. So it was a little bit hard to see where the Archeops fit, but like it typically wasn't coming to a game 1. It was mostly just like, if Incineroar has given me too many problems, then I might end up bringing it with maybe with like Raichu, Grimmsnarl, Celesteela, something like that. So going into team preview here, so the first thing I noticed was that there's no Incineroar, which was surprising to me, but I was kind of relieved. Incineroar was maybe going to give Celesteela some problems because I don't have a super effective hit against it, and it's Dark type, so it can't get hit by Fake Tears. I didn't think it would be too big of a problem because I was able to mitigate physical damage pretty well, but I think maybe a bulky set with like Snarl or Parting Shot may have been things might have gotten ugly if she did something like that. But it was extra good for Mamoswine because I just didn't need the Oblivious at all. I was okay going into the Incineroar matchup without it, but no Incineroar just makes the Mamoswine look even better. The only thing that really looks weird here is the Beware. I'm going into this match looking at team preview. I'm really not sure what the Beware is doing. Turns out it was also Scarf Coaching, so we both ended up bringing Scarf Coaching, which was kind of funny. But aside from that, my first impressions of this team preview was that everything looks pretty normal. The only thing I expected to see that was not here was the Incineroar. So game 1, Celesteela looked pretty good. I went with the Celesteela Raichu lead. She actually didn't bring her Hail mode at all through this whole thing, but Celesteela ended up getting crit by a Max Flare after I charmed the Rhyperior, which was rather frustrating, but it actually turned out okay because I had Mamoswine and Sawk in the back, who proceeded to come in and sort of save the day. I got hit by like a -2 or -4 Heat Crash from the Rhyperior. Base power was pretty low. Had Thick Fat, activated Weakness Policy, and Mamoswine and Scarf Sawk were actually able to clean up pretty good. Especially since she's got a ton of fighting weaknesses on this team. I wasn't even clicking coaching. It was just kind of blitzed forward with fast close combats and worked out pretty well. Game 2 was much cleaner. I went with the Celesteela Grimmsnarl, and it was a pretty clean, just Fake Tears sweep. The Steel Spike boosts and the Reflect were super, super good. I believe that was actually a 4-0, so pretty clean sweep there. So that's my second win. I'm now 2-0. You can see the down there at the bottom below the team preview thing. I've got my my record so far and my win and differential from this particular match. So I got a 2-0 win with +7 against Hunter. I got a 2-0 win with +6 against Jess. I'm now 2 wins, 0 losses with a +13 differential. Pretty damn good start to the season. Going into week 2, here I have I think this was actually a pretty important transaction, even though Audino didn't really come to a lot of matches. Rapidash was just, it was a filler pick. It was not. I kind of picked it thinking like, yeah, the Rapidashes are kind of cool. Maybe I could do some like Imprison Trick Room stuff or Heal Pulse stuff, whatever, maybe sort of. And I was never really too enthusiastic about it, but Audino, I noticed, I was kind of just looking through a lot of the tiers, seeing if there was anything useful that I had missed, and it turned out I had actually kind of missed Audino. It wasn't on my radar, mostly because I didn't intend to have much of a Trick Room mode initially, especially because I don't have a whole lot of stuff. I have some stuff like Celesteela and Grimmsnarl, which are low-ish speed, but not really low enough to be considered Trick Room sweepers. But Audino looked kind of cool. It gave me like a Trick Room option rather than like a hard Trick Room mode. If you go back and look at like Hunter's team, especially with the 6 that he brought against me, that's more like a hard Trick Room mode. This is more just, having Audino here is more like a Trick Room option. It's not something that's a big part of the team. It's not coming most of the time. It's more just like, hey, if Trick Room looks good with this sort of mid-speed mon here, like Celesteela, or offensive Grimmsnarl, yeah, that's it's an option. It's something that I could go for, and filling a tier 4 slot to have an option like that is really nice, because it's a low tier slot that you're not really gonna get. You're not typically going to get a lot of use out of, and it didn't require me to scrap any of the essential components of my Celesteela comp. So, and it actually had, like, for a tier 4, it actually had like pretty good bulk and unique typing for a Trick Room setter. There's really not a lot of normal type Trick Room setters. It's pretty much just like Audino, like the Porygon family. You got like Indeedee, male Indeedee, and a Rangaroo, but they're also still psychic types, so they still have those dark and bug weaknesses. So having a normal type Trick Room setter, I thought was interesting, unique. Only one weakness, so if I'm really worried about Audino just getting blown up, I can just toss a Choppleberry on that thing. Suddenly it has no weaknesses. That's pretty cool. And it actually has really, really nice coverage, which but it also has low offensive base stats. It's base 60 in both its attack and special attack, which is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it means you're not going to be able to do much damage with it in Trick Room, but it allows for a lot of different weakness policy combinations. I was considering stuff like Fire Punch into Celesteela, or Draining Kiss into Grimmsnarl, stuff like that. So had a lot of options for that. I wasn't really sure how much use I was going to get out of it, but I think it was a cool thing to have, and at the very least, it was way more useful than fucking Galarian Rapidash here. That thing was. I think it can do some work on the right team. This was not the team. So moving into let's see. Moving into week... Oh, right, another transaction. Okay, so I actually had a week 3 bye, so I don't have another battle here. This was... this transaction was not really meant to, like... It wasn't really meant to improve my team comp or anything. It was mostly just for Dan. And I wasn't really... I had a different idea for what I wanted this slot to be, especially after I grabbed the Audino. Salazzle was just not very useful. I didn't feel like I wanted it really in any match. Like it had... I knew during the draft it was going to have anti-synergy with the Rain mode, even though it formed a Fire-Water Grass core there. But that turned out to be more of a problem than I expected. I figured I could, bring Salazzle out front, bring the rain a little bit later, which maybe could have worked. I don't know. But Salazzle just, I didn't really feel much of a role on the team. I didn't feel like I needed a fire type. Celesteela was my fire type. I was just max flaring all over everything in the first couple of weeks. So, like, I don't know. It didn't really seem that important. And the Focus Sash demand on my team was just too high. Like, you really just can't bring Salazzle without a Focus Sash. And Raichu wanted a Focus Sash basically every time. I think, like, I ran Raichu a lot this season. I don't think I ever ran it without a Focus Sash. For obvious reasons. That's just the thing you put on Raichu. And Raichu was way more important than Salazzle was on this team. So, I just, it was very hard to bring. It wasn't really doing anything. I swapped it out for Passimian here just because I was looking for some kind of decent Defiant or competitive Pokemon in Tier 3 just as kind of a placeholder so that I could deter support Arcanine. I wasn't really concerned about Intimidate on Arcanine because I didn't have a lot of physical attackers that really gave a shit. Like, with one of my previous transactions, I already made my ground type immune to Intimidate, and a lot of my team is special anyway. Really, this was mostly a deterrent for Snarl on the Arcanine. So, because going into my matchup with Dan, sweeping with Celesteela seemed like a good idea, but I wanted I definitely wanted the special variant with Fake Tears again, and Snarl was going to be a big problem for that. So this was kind of a way to deter that, which I guess was kind of successful. I don't know that he would have used a support Arcanine anyway. I think there's a good chance he would have stuck with the Arcanine that he used, regardless of Passimian's presence or whether I had any kind of Defiant or competitive. But I still like what I did with this trade here, even though I fully, when I made this trade, I was fully aware that I was going to drop Passimian immediately after my battle with Dan. So, next up is that battle with Dan, like I mentioned. This was a pretty big game for us. I thought maybe even more so for me because we were the only undefeated players left in Blue Division. And I'd only played against Dan once before, and I did not win. So I was he seemed to like the fact that he was undefeated against me, and I couldn't let that stand. So this was a pretty important match for both of those reasons. My main mode here was the rain mode. It looked really good into a lot of his team. Especially with the Colossal being there. I was pretty concerned about Colossal given that I did not have redirection on this team. So the rain was pretty important for dealing with that, especially with the Assault Vest on Ludi, just taking less damage from what was probably a special Colossal. Could have been physical. That would have actually been a good choice, assuming he could actually outspeed in one shot Ludicolo, which I don't know. I think I probably did the calcs for that, but I don't remember at this point. So the main mode here was rain up front with Celesteela Grimmsnarl in the back. I kind of had some flexibility on what I wanted to max between the Ludicolo and Celesteela. It really wasn't a clear case of like, well, I'm going to lead rain max Ludicolo. Like that was definitely a possibility, but it wasn't. It was never a guarantee because Celesteela was also a very good max option here, especially because I had Meteor Beam without Power Herb. So maxing Ludicolo was often a good idea, but a little bit dangerous because of that part of the Celesteela set. Assault Vest pretty self-explanatory. The Choice Scarf on Pelipper was probably a little bit weird for this matchup, but I really liked having the option for a Scarf Rain Dance because this matchup kind of sort of mirrored the matchup that I had with Dan in Season 2, because at that time I actually had a Tornadus team with Purloin, and I brought Sunny Day Purloin against his Rain mode, I believe, with Polytoad Ludicolo, I think. I don't remember. He had Rain. That's the point. And I brought Sunny Day Purloin against him, and I figured, all right, well, makes sense that he's gonna do that to me here. Even if I'm expecting it, it's a really good tech. It's a really good way to deal with the Rain mode, because Ludicolo in particular does really well into his team. So the Scarf Rain Dance was kind of a tech that I picked up from from Alex Ogloza, actually. Back in 2014, he ran Scarf Politoed with his Ludicolo with Rain Dance on the Politoed, so that he could click Rain Dance and get Rain back up after Charizard Y Mega Evolves and sets the Sun. So this was kind of the same idea here. Purloin wants to go for Prankster Rain Dance, or excuse me, Prankster Sunny Day. Cool. I have a super fast Pelipper with Rain Dance that's going to reset the rain and let Ludicolo do what it wants to do. It was not something I ended up clicking, even though he did actually bring Sunny Day Purloin. But it was a cool tech that I used in a couple future matchups as well. I never ended up clicking it, but having the option there, and also letting your opponent know that you're willing to bring that even repeatedly, is I think pretty important. I liked having that option here. Next up, we got a couple other mons here. We got the Mamoswine and the Audino. Audino was really just it was never meant to come in game one. It was really just there in case he ended up bringing Trick Room, and I ended up... this was like the one Trick Room mode that I really struggled with, mostly because Copperaja has had a good way to actually hit my Celesteela, and I was also worried about some ally switch shenanigans as well, because that was kind of the only way that Cofagrigus had to really support Copperaja in Trick Room. I felt like I had a decent game plan against his Trick Room mode, but also Grimmsnarl just dying to a max Steel Spike was also a problem. But I felt like Roselli Berry was more important for the Primarina matchup. So the Audino was really just there in case I just got absolutely fucked by a Trick Room mode in like game 1 or 2, and I needed to bring Audino for some extra help out there in a game 2 or 3. He never actually brought his Trick Room mode, so I never bought my Audino. The Iron Ball just lets it underspeed those base 30s. After you, pretty self-explanatory, ally switch things, reverse Trick Room, little bit of extra damage with Helping Hand. It's, pretty self-explanatory. The Mamoswine was the one thing here that I felt really awkward about. I actually liked it in the previous match, and it had a decent amount of success against Jess, but here it was very weird. I ended up going with Oblivious again, or not again. Rather, I switched over to Oblivious for the Arcanine here. But I just felt like the weaknesses to Fire and Steel really hurt here. It was I struggled to figure out like what exactly I wanted the Mamoswine to do, what berry to put on it to protect it from whatever. I considered Focus Sash as well, but like I still didn't feel like that was very good. I felt like Mamoswine was mandatory here, but it just like it was really tough to use defensively, and I just didn't really have the right support for it. It didn't really have a very well-defined role. The main mode was the Rain mode plus Celesteela Grimmsnarl, and then Audino was kind of a backup for this other thing, and then Mamoswine's just, I don't know, it was sort of tacked on at the end. I didn't really feel good about this set. It didn't really... I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. The team felt unfinished with this Mamoswine. I never ended up bringing it because it just wasn't great. It was a potential max option, but it just had a very weird matchup defensively because of the ice typing, really. So going into team preview, I wasn't really sure what to expect from Dan because there's a lot of stuff on his draft that honestly made sense. No Garchomp or no Tangela. That seemed interesting, but like if any one of these things decided not to show up, it would have kind of made some sense at least, because there's a lot of stuff on here I thought was actually good. And you can't bring everything. You can only bring 6, so didn't blame him for not wanting to bring those. Everything else, made a good amount of sense. There were really no surprises in team preview. Decided to stick to my original game plan. I just led with Rain. I ended up maxing Ludicolo. Dan's prep here actually almost won him the game. The Sharp Beak on Tornadus was really, really good. It allowed Tornadus' max airstream to consistently two-shot Dynamax Assault Vest Ludicolo and outspeed it after one airstream. So really good prep on Dan's part. And then the Arcanine also having Wild Charge on the Choice Band set just absolutely blew up the Celesteela. I think it's fair to say he probably deserved the win in that first game, but my Grimmsnarl being faster than the Primarina was actually pretty big, and it was has a decent attack stat, base 120. I didn't have any attack investment, but it was still doing good damage with Spirit Break. I think if I recall correctly, he was sort of leaving the Grimmsnarl alone for a little while, and I was just sort of spreading some damage with Spirit Break, and then the Scarf Pelipper ended up coming back out in the late game, and I surprised him with the Scarf. Was able to get a surprise KO on the Arcanine with Scald, so I just barely eked out a win there. And then game 2, excuse me, game 2. Game 2 was very evenly matched. I think I won there mostly because of the difference in what we each got out of our Dynamaxes. Dan ended up getting a pretty solid KO early on, and my Celesteela ended up getting 2 KOs while it was maxed. I think the Occaberry and the Rockfall on the Celesteela was really huge for the Arcanine matchup. Probably would have lost if it wasn't for that piece of my prep. And also, I mean, we can't forget the Rockfall into the Purloin while the Primarina was trying to go for Max Weather Ball. Because the sun was out, the Purloin had just gone for Sunny Day, so he was trying to go for a Max Flare into my Celesteela. Steela turned out to be faster, and I killed the Purloin with Max Rockfall, set up the sand, and then Rockfall ended up going into the Celesteela, and I saved my Occaberry for the Flare Blitz from the Arcanine. So that was pretty crucial. I ended up pulling out the win there after taking out some of his bigger threats, and then the Ludicolo and Grimmsnarl finished things off. So much closer game than the other two. Which makes sense. Dan and I were at the top of the division. He was definitely my toughest opponent so far, so makes sense. But I got my 2-0 win there. Only a +2 differential this time, so I'm now 3-0 at plus 15. After this, I went back to the transaction that I expected to get. There was part of me that was a little bit worried about, like, oh, well, maybe I don't want to just pick up a placeholder for that slot in case somebody picks up the Cursola. I wasn't really worried about it. I've literally never seen anyone in any league ever draft Cursola. I didn't think it was on anyone's radar, but it was... I felt like it was actually pretty good with what I was doing. I sort of... started this Trick Room option with Audino, and then Cursola just adds to it a little bit. Good Ghost Normal combination, kind of like the Coffagrigus Snorlax thing I was thinking about during the draft. Except it's kind of reversed this time. The normal type is the Trick Room setter, and the Ghost type is the Trick Room sweeper. So that was kind of interesting. I thought Cursola is just a very, very, very underexplored and actually high potential Trick Room sweeper. It's got 145 base special attack, which is amazing for really any Pokemon. 30 base speed, which is like the baseline of what you want for your Trick Room sweepers. That's incredible. And then it's got amazing type coverage. It's got Stab Ghost, which is great because it hits almost everything for at least neutral damage. Very few things resist Ghost. And then it's got all this other coverage. It's got Fire, Water, Grass, all of it. Scald, Energy Ball, and unfortunately the fire move is Burning Jealousy. But 120 base power max flare. That's still pretty good. And then you've got Rock and Ground coverage, which go great together. Quake Slide is a big thing. Here it's instead of Quake Slide, it's going to be Earth Power and Power Gem. I think it also gets Meteor Beam, maybe. Yes, but Meteor Beam is probably less important when you have access to Power Gem. It also gets Psychic, I believe. That's much less important, but it's there if you want it. I just thought this thing looked so incredibly good as a Trick Room sweeper on paper, so I wanted to pick it up and try it. The season to me was about experimenting, and Cursola was, it's perfect time to experiment with a little bit of Cursola. Speaking of which, Cursola decided to make an appearance here in in week 5 against Charles. This week, a lot of my matchups have been centered around Celesteela for obvious reasons. It's amazing. I have great support for it. I built my entire team around it, so yeah, I'm going to use it a lot. This week included. I felt like Celesteela had a pretty positive matchup into a lot of this stuff, except for the Heatran. The Heatran was a really big problem for me this week, especially next to Liepard. I was definitely concerned about like some speed control from Liepard with Thunder Wave, Snarl for my because a lot of my team is special, Fake Tears to really enable Heatran to go in and just blow shit up with big max moves. So that seemed like a big problem for me, so I had to sort of get creative with some of my solutions for that. I was still bringing Celesteela pretty much every time, but it was not often a lead for me. The first thing that I came up with here was going for the Raichu Ludicolo. I felt like for a long time in prep, I felt like I felt a lot of I was struggling to fit everything I wanted to on this team, and I got what I wanted when I finally realized I could just scrap the Pelipper and put Rain Dance on the fucking Raichu. Because then I get everything I want, and I have a slot open for the Celesteela Grimmsnarl. I've got slots open for the Audino Cursola, and then the Raichu Ludicolo lead was just excellent for Liepard Heatran. Took a long time to arrive at this exact solution, but I really like what I had here. I had the faster fake out for Liepard, so that was nice. I had Rain Dance, obviously, for Swift Swim, to counter max flares coming out from Heatran. The White Herb on Ludicolo was something I was really excited to try out. I didn't end up bringing Ludicolo to the match, actually, but when I landed on the White Herb, I was really, really satisfied with this matchup because I was very, very concerned about both Snarl and Fake Tears coming out from the Liepard. So that was that was my way of denying that, at least for one turn. And then I also had Mudshot as kind of a backup coverage against Heatran in case he found some way to get Sun up consistently, even though I had Max Geyser and Rain Dance. It was just an extra way to hit Heatran, and special defense boosts were pretty good too, especially since I was immune to Fake Tears, at least for one turn. So that was kind of my solution there. I was if I'm bringing that mode. Probably got Celesteela Grimmsnarl in the back again. And I also landed on this Trick Room mode, which was a little bit weird. I felt it was a little bit shaky, but I actually really liked it, and it had a pretty good matchup into the Heatran, just because Cursola has access to that Earth Power. I want to use Giga Drain on it. I actually don't remember off the top of my head whether Cursola gets Energy Ball, but well, use Giga Drain here, not a big deal. Mostly just for the Gastrodon. So I kind of came up with like a script here. Pretty much every time I was going to be leading with Raichu Audino. Audino's very bulky. Pretty much the only thing that's able to one-shot it was going to be the Heracross. I didn't really expect Heracross to come, but I slapped the Chople Berry on it anyway because I built it to survive a hit from pretty much anything else. So the plan here was just simple. Fake out Trick Room with a Raichu Audino lead. And then I was going to go for a very slow Volt Switch in Trick Room while Audino protected, so I could get Cursola in safely since Raichu was probably going to be the fastest thing on the field. It was going to Volt Switch last. Cursola comes in almost for free, ideally. And then I had a min speed Audino with a Cursola set that was just 1 point faster, so I was able to self-Shadow Ball into the Weakness Policy Cursola before Cursola attacked, and that was the Cursola was going to be my main max option, assuming I get this mode off properly. And I was able to. I was a little bit worried about the speed stats because I knew that I knew that his Trick Room mode, his Trick Room sweepers like Mudsdale and Gastrodon, to the degree that Gastrodon's a sweeper, it's kind of not. But they're both slower than Audino, so that means if they were min speed, they would be slower than both Audino and Cursola with this set that I was using. But I was using some intel from some of Charles' team building videos, and I noticed that he was when he was not using his Aromatisse, he was not using min speed on his Mudsdale and Gastrodon. So I felt pretty safe going with this Trick Room mode if I did not see Aromatisse in Team Preview. And I figured it was actually pretty unlikely that he was going to do that, mostly because of Celesteela, not only because Celesteela has a positive type matchup into Aromatisse, but also Celesteela is just incredibly hard to break through with the Trick Room mode that he has. A couple of ground types, not really going to be able to sweep when your opponent's got a big fat Dynamax Celesteela on the field, so I felt pretty confident that he was not going to go for a Trick Room mode like that. If he did, I had other stuff I could do. The Audino Cursola was not completely off the table, but it was unlikely to show up if I knew he was going with that Trick Room mode. One comment on Mamoswine here. Mamoswine, it seems to look great on paper. It's got a really positive matchup into both of his tier 1s. But it seemed like a no-brainer at first, and I know Charles was really, really expecting it, and I think he was right to expect it, but like, fuck, man, it was like, it felt so awkward again, and I just needed too much other stuff that it actually didn't make the cut this time. I just didn't have the right support for it. I absolutely could not use a Focus Sash on it because the Focus Sash on Raichu was way too important. Raichu was big for the Trick Room mode and for the Ludicolo mode. And it just had, the Mamoswine just had such an awkward type matchup into Heatran without the right support for it. It's just really bad when your main ground type also happens to be weak to both of Heatran's stabs, and the calcs for Mamoswine were just not working out, man. It was bad. So really didn't like it here. This is the second time that Mamoswine was awkward and kind of bad, but it certainly won't be the last. So that's why there was no Mamoswine here. Going into team preview, most of this looks normal. The Corviknight, Latias, Heatran, Lipard, that all looks normal. Gastrodon, I wasn't really sure if it was coming. I have the rain mode, obviously, but Gastrodon's got a real awkward matchup against a rain sweeper that is also a grass type, so not surprised to see it, but I was curious whether he would bring it. No Aromatisse is big here, because that means I can just go for my Trick Room mode. Because I'm not expecting really anything to be slower than the Audino Cursola. The only thing that can be is Gastrodon, and even if it is, not really worried about Gastrodon fucking with my mode too much. Heracross is really the only wild card here. It's not something I expected, but like I said, I put the Chople Berry on Audino anyway, just because that was like the only thing that was going to really be able to one-shot the Audino. Getting Trick Room up was just too important. I considered Mental Herb, I guess, but it's just way too easy to just fake out the taunt user. So I didn't really need that. So game one it was a mostly clean Cursola sweep. Cursola ended up going down because its defense stat is terrible. My script went perfectly. I went for the Fake Out Trick Room, and then I went for the Slow Volt switch with Protect. And then I just went for the Self Shadow Ball, max on Cursola, and started blowing shit up. It was really cool. Celesteela was able to clean up there in the end. Game two, I just, because game one went pretty well, I just went for the same thing. My turn two was a little bit weird because I started overthinking my position a little bit. I was going for my normal script. I got the Fake Out Trick Room. I got the Trick Room up. Then I was protecting Audino, going for the Slow Volt switch. And then something weird happened. He had Dynamax Corviknight on the field, and he went for an Airstream in Trick Room, which made Heracross faster than Raichu, so Raichu was going to Volt Switch first. Turns out Heracross is actually Scarf. It was going to be faster anyway. I did not know that at the time, so I thought he was going for this big brain play where he knew I was going to Volt Switch into the Cursola. He had Throat Chop on his Heracross. He made Heracross faster in Trick Room, so it would move after the Raichu Volt Switched, and it would Throat Chop into the Cursola and kill it. Turns out that's not at all what was happening. He was just Scarfed and he was going for coaching. So I think there's a good chance my script would have gone fine if I just went into Cursola there. It would have been a little bit awkward because then I'd be going for Phantasms and the Mirror Armor would drop Cursola's defense, which was a little bit weird. So maybe going into Celesteela was the right decision anyway. But in any case, I went with Celesteela. I had a lot less offense on my Celesteela than I would have on the Cursola, so it was a little bit tough to abuse all of my Trick Room turns, but at the same time, Celesteela was still very, very hard to break through. And then... Trick Room ended up ending. Celesteela got some good offense off, and then the surprise Scarf on the Heracross actually almost lost me the game there. But a Magma Storm miss later on ended up saving me, which is why you don't run Magma Storm. Public service announcement: anyone running Heatran, please don't use Magma Storm unless you have like Gravity or something. So just don't. So anyway, took the win there. Next up, I believe... Yeah, next up, just going straight into my Week 6 match, I passed on transactions the following week. I didn't make another transaction until I think the last available transaction, which was probably a mistake, but fuck, man, it took me a while to realize how garbage Mamoswine was. So, going into Week 6, this was probably my toughest matchup, at least it felt that way against like the Blastoise, Clefairy, Togedemaru lead. Not lead, but against that mode. The first piece of this team that I decided on was the Scarf Regidrago because it was mainly meant for Dragapult leads. Helping Hand, Dragon Energy. I had to go Timid to outspeed every Dragapult, but even while you're Timid, Helping Hand, Spread Dragon Energy will one-shot a Dynamax Dragapult with Friend Guard, which actually surprised me, but you know what? I took that one and ran with it, so I slapped Regidrago on the team. It was also good for just late game cleanup in the back if I was going with a different lead, expecting something other than Dragapult. The Sawk here was also another kind of niche pick, mainly for the Crocodile, because I was going for physical Celesteela for the first time here. So I was definitely worried about Intimidates from Crocodile coming out. So Sawk was kind of a counter and a deterrent to help physical Celesteela out a little bit. Adrenaline Orb actually does activate, even though you don't get the attack drop with Inner Focus when you're intimidated. So I get the speed boost. I can one-shot with close combat. Also had double kick to one-shot the Togedemaru through Focus Sash or Sturdy, probably Focus Sash, because you're gonna want Lightning Rod here. And then the Ice Punch was just a little bit of extra coverage for stuff like Dragapult, Serena, Dragalge, that kind of thing. But the fighting coverage was the main point here. Ice was just good because the Dragapult and Dragalge were the things that were not getting hit by fighting super well. So got a super effective hit against those. Mamoswine did end up coming here. It did some stuff. It didn't perform super great. Week 2 is honestly the only time it did. But I felt like having a ground type here was really, really important, especially against the Togedemaru, because the Tog was just giving me a lot of problems. But, my ground type was also weak to Togedemaru, and it was slower. It was a real problem. And I wasn't really willing to put the Scarf on Mamoswine, because I felt like it was important to switch around my moves, because the Steel and Ice coverage was actually really important here as well, and I really wanted the Scarf on Drago for Dragapult leads. But, yeah, defensively, the Ice typing just made things really awkward. When you're trying to hit Steel types with your ground type, but your ground type is weak to the Steel types, it sucks, man. It gave me a lot of problems. But I still brought it. It still felt pretty essential just for killing the Togedemaru. I had Brick Break as well with the Raichu, just as a way to one-shot the Togedemaru, two-shot the Togedemaru. But Mamoswine felt essential, even though it was kind of bad, honestly. The Blastoise matchup, the main thing I did for that was the main thing I had for that was a Celesteela Raichu lead, which I went with 2 out of 3 games. It was really helpful for Celesteela to get some special defense boosts against a potential Shell Smash lead. Electro Web is spread, goes around Lightning Rod, goes around Follow Me, and it's able to burn the Blastoise's White Herb, so it's getting those defense and special defense drops, make it easier for Celesteela to kill it. So even with this lead, I felt like I had an awkward matchup. This was just the best I could do, and it turned out okay. Ludicolo here was kind of the oh shit button against Blastoise in case Blastoise was just way too much. It was a weird set, but he had a lot of special attackers, especially the Shell Smash Blastoise was really a problem for my team. So Amnesia Ludicolo with Steel Spike boosts from the Celesteela and leftovers and Leech Seed. It was just kind of a surprise against Blastoise leads that was it was going to be really hard to break through, and it was water type, so it wasn't taking the Cannonade damage. So felt like it was just extra insurance against the Blastoise, because I was very worried about offensive Blastoise here. So going into team preview, some of this stuff makes sense, but there's also some pretty big surprises. No Dragapult was very surprising, so Regidrago lead here was just completely off the table. I did put it in the back, but as a lead, when I'm not seeing Dragapult here, just a big nope. So that pretty much meant, because he has this Clefairy Blastoise Togedemaru, which I fully expected. That pretty much means that every time in Game 1 I'm leading Celesteela with Raichu, regardless of what the other three Mons are. Game 1 I ended up winning, made a couple questionable calls. I let Raichu go down too early. I didn't focus down the Togedemaru as much as I should have. I ended up like protecting Mamoswine when it was just about to go down to Cannonade damage. That was dumb. But Regidrago in the back ended up pulling out a win there, just barely. Game 2, I adjusted. I played a little bit better. I had a pretty decent position. I preserved the Raichu a little bit better. And I actually would have won if not for a timeout and a flinch, because on both of those, on Mamoswine, because on both of those 2 turns, I intended to target the Carbink with Mamoswine, had 100% accurate heavy slam, and then the game ended on with a 1 HP Carbink against a Regidrago choice locked into Dragon Energy, so it just it took out the Regidrago there. Game 3, I don't know if I really needed to do this, because if I just played properly again with the same mode. Another thing about Team Preview, no Crocodile. No Crocodile basically means that Sawk is not coming, like, almost ever. Some situations where it might, I guess, but it's mostly just there for Crook. Game 3, I probably could have won with the same mode, but I also felt like with what he was bringing, he had no answer to the Ludicolo, especially because he brought Dragalge in Game 1. It ended up getting one-shot by a Max Quake, and he didn't bring it in Game 2, which I think was honestly probably correct. He adjusted over to his Carbink because I was bringing the Regidrago, but so I figure, especially with that, like, Ludicolo's okay even if he brings the Dragalge, because I can still Amnesia up, I'm going to be faster, and I still felt comfortable playing in Trick Room. But with what he was bringing, he just had no answers to Ludicolo, I thought. So I ended up leading with the Celesteela Ludicolo, brought out the big guns, started boosting with Amnesia, and he just could not break through it. I didn't really need Ludicolo, but it was because I was able to KO pretty much everything with like Celesteela and Regidrago, but damn, Ludicolo was just such an incredibly strong win condition, getting special defense boosts with Amnesia, defense boosts with Steel Spike. It was really nice. So Game 3 was definitely the easy win out of these 3 games. So now I am this is the first time I actually dropped a game, but I'm still undefeated, 5-0 plus 19 differential. And next up, again, no transaction. I skipped my transactions again. Probably shouldn't have done that, but my match against Dina here in week 7. This was my last in-division match, so it was going to be would have been really nice to take a win here and then go into cross-division matches undefeated. I figured my rain mode looked really, really good here, and I kind of wanted to experiment with something a little bit new. I knew that Cinderace Clefable was a pretty strong mode for her. It was something that she went with pretty frequently. It seemed like she was very comfortable with it. So my rain mode here was the main answer to that. I had 2 very fast water types with spread moves, so I could just blow up the Cinderace pretty easily. The speeds on these 2 were very important. So, like I mentioned earlier, Pelipper can actually be built to outspeed Ludicolo if Ludicolo is slow and Pelipper is very, very fast with a Scarf. So I had to build Ludicolo to just barely outspeed Jolly Cinderace by 1 point, and then it turned out the speeds worked out kind of perfectly for that. The Timid Scarf Pelipper also then just barely outsped Ludicolo if I went max speed. So speeds worked out great against Cinderace. I didn't really pay enough attention to Noivern. I was aware that this Timid Scarf Ludicolo was going to speed tie with Timid Noivern, Timid Max Speed Noivern. So that made me a little bit nervous. I tossed an Ice Beam on there anyway. But I didn't really... That also means that Ludicolo was slower than Noivern, by the way, which is very awkward. And probably a bad decision on my part. I did not respect the Noivern enough in this matchup. But the Absorb Bulb was, I thought, was a really cool idea, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get another opportunity to use it. And the speeds against Cinderace just worked out too perfectly. I could Surf myself, get a special attack boost. I really liked that mode. Again, I had a pretty standard Celesteela, Raichu, Grimmsnarl mode. I got to run Thunder on Raichu here for the first time. That was pretty cool. This is the first time I was actually able to bring Raichu and Rain in the same matchup, which is a little bit weird considering that I drafted the Drizzle and the Lightning Rod both to help Celesteela. So and they have a little bit of synergy there with the Thunder as well. So you'd think they would come a lot more at the same time, but here we are in week 7. This is the first time I'm actually doing it. I guess I could have put Thunder on Raichu against Charles, but that was relied a little bit too much on Rain, I guess. I needed Volt Switch, so... the weakness policy here, honestly, was probably a bad idea. I was fully aware that it was... Clefable had unaware it was going to ignore the boosts, but I felt like my offensive calcs didn't really need any kind of a boosting item. I thought that a berry was kind of unnecessary because I had both Drizzle and Lightning Rod in this matchup. If she knew about the weakness policy, I thought it might be an extra deterrent to some super effective hits. Clefable also seemed relatively easy to deal with as long as I was bringing Grimmsnarl and clicking Taunt or Fake Tears, depending on what her item was. It had to be either Babiri or Mental Herb. So I felt pretty comfortable with that. I think the reasoning is sound, even though I think there were some better options. I actually think I should have put a Life Orb on the Celesteela because she had a very, very specially defensive Clefable. So if I was Life Orb Celesteela, then a Fake Tears Steel Spike would have been able to KO through the Babiri Berry. But without it, I couldn't. Mamoswine, I mean, I feel a little bit like a broken record, but this is the last time, I promise. Mamoswine was sort of tacked on at the end. It felt pretty subpar. It was mostly just there to hit, flying types. Salt Vest for taking special attacks from like Articuno or Noivern, I guess. I believe I built it to live a Hydro Pump from, or maybe even a Max Geyser from the Rotom, which, I don't know, was like important a little bit, I guess, but it had such a terrible matchup into Rotom. It doesn't have anything to hit Rotom. The best thing it's got is resisted Ice Stab, which is okay, I guess. Like, I could have put Rock Slide, but like, I'm pretty sure Stab resisted Icicle Crash does more than a spread neutral Rock Slide, which kind of sucks. It had a bad matchup into Cinderace too. Like, yes, I had Thick Fat, but Cinderace has fighting coverage as well. And she was going for Max Flare as well instead of the G-Max move to override the Rain, which was smart. Good decision on her end. Mamoswine was just, again, kind of tacked on at the end because it didn't feel like it had a well-defined role. There were just too many fucking weaknesses. I didn't really feel comfortable bringing it, like, ever. Again, the team felt kind of unfinished with Mamoswine on it. It just wasn't good. But I feel like I sort of ran out of time trying to prep and didn't really have anything better in that 6th slot. Maybe I could have come up with something better. I don't know. Maybe Regidrago or something, but the Scarf is already on Pelipper. I don't know, man. It was bad. So going into team preview, most of this stuff made sense. The Noivern was the only wild card. Like I said, I kind of thought about it in team preview, but definitely not enough. And I definitely did not respect it enough with my Rain mode. Everything else looked very normal. She had a tendency to bring a lot of the same stuff this season. The Noivern was really the only wild card, and turned out to be my demise. Game 1 went pretty well. I feel like I played well. I positioned well. I mitigated her Dynamax and got enough out of my Dynamax. It was a pretty good win. Game 2, she adjusted the way that she played. I think she brought the same mode. She just adjusted her move selection and in a pretty good way. She ended up with about the same kind of positioning that I had in Game 1. She mitigated my Dynamax pretty well. Got a pretty decent, got a good amount out of her Dynamax. And she got a pretty solid win in Game 2. Game 3 mostly came down to me being reckless. I kind of lost Celesteela for no reason. She Dynamaxed the Noivern, and I definitely expected it to have fire coverage, but I started just was like, yeah, this seems like a passive lead. I don't think she's going to really do anything. Like, I know I can survive like a Flamethrower or Max Flare anyway. But she ended up just going for a Helping Hand Max Flare and just blew up the Celesteela, which is really bad for me. I thought, surely she's not going to do that when I can just Dynamax with a Weakness Policy and switch Pelipper in. But she did. So that was pretty bad. I still maybe could have won if I had more information on the Noivern. I didn't know it was Choice Scarf at this time. I was looking at the order of activation between Pelipper and Noivern on their abilities, and Frisk went first, so I figured, oh, okay, well, I know they speed tie if she's Timid Max Speed, so that must be a speed tie, and Noivern won the speed tie. So I just assumed it was Focus Sash the whole way through, because I didn't see the Runerigus at all for the whole set. So I assumed it was Focus Sash. She never actually revealed the scarf. It was a very awkward matchup regardless. But I thought, I after the Celesteela went down in Game 3, I thought, all right, well, she's Scarf, so I kind of have to rely on I don't know what, maybe a Scary Face and a Freeze, so I clicked Scary Face into Noivern, even though it was slower since it was maxed and my Pelipper was Scarf. I could have won maybe with a Fake Tears Ice Beam into it. That would have gotten rid of it, and maybe I still had my Dynamax left. A late game Dynamax Ludicolo maybe could have pulled it out. But the information on or rather the lack of information on Noivern just fucking killed me, man. So that was rough. The Noivern matchup was very tough there. Looking back on this match, reflections, what could I have done better? I kind of analyzed my play in Game 3 where I lost. I could have won there. Like I said, Life Orb would have been a better item on Celesteela. I think I should have brought Grimmsnarl more because I left it on the bench in Game 1 and 2. It was, and I had trouble with Clefable, which is part of why I brought it out in Game 3. I should have been maybe more comfortable with leaving Rain on the bench. I just kind of tunnel visioned into like Rain is a super good matchup into Cinderace, and then I didn't really consider the Noivern enough. So the Noivern matchup was just was very awkward. And I definitely should have had something better in the 6th slot. Like I said, don't know what that would be. I don't know if there was any Mamoswine set that was actually good here, but yeah, the Mamoswine, it was bad, man. It was just bad. Which is why I did this. So, didn't do any transactions for week 5 and 6. Dropped the Mamoswine for Diggersby again. Because I liked Diggersby before. I only brought it to one match before I traded it away. But you know what, man? It turns out Mamoswine is garbage, I guess. I never really knew that before. I didn't have experience with Mamoswine. Now I do, and now I know. Yeah, it's like, dude, when your ground type is weak to the shit that it needs to hit with ground moves, you're gonna have a bad time, man. So, fuck Mamoswine. Love Diggersby. I don't care that it can be intimidated. It's not weak to fire and steel, so I'm down. Fuck Mamoswine. Mamoswine might still be good on the right teams. I don't know. Like, if somebody else drafts a Mamoswine in the future, like, I'm not telling you not to draft it, because ice and ground is still like a great typing. I'll go a little bit more into that later, but if you draft Mamoswine and you make it work, props to you. I hope somebody does it. After this, it left a real bad, really sour taste in my mouth. So, going into week 8, got my boy Diggersby back, way better than Mamoswine. Immediately, I started feeling better building with this thing than I did with fucking Mamoswine. My main goals here were really to just abuse some common type weaknesses and also just kind of protect against some big threats that I was worried about, and also some disruption, particularly from the Meowstic. So my primary mode actually was going to be the Archeops and Diggersby, with Celesteela and Grimmsnarl in the back. I figured if I get to Team Preview and I don't see Meowstic, Celesteela Grimmsnarl can work as a lead with the other two in the back. It just depends on what else he has in Team Preview. But if he has Meowstic, Archeops Diggersby was pretty essential. I was really worried about a lot of prankster shit and just disruption that the Meowstic could do. Charm and, Thunder Wave, shit like that. So I had Quick Guard. Quick Guard I thought would be really important on Archeops, and I think it would have been if he had Meowstic. Turns out he didn't. Spoiler alert. But I was actually really happy with my Archeops here. Going without an item just for the extra damage on Acrobatics was a little bit weird, because I figured I could get what I needed out of like a Sharp Beak dual Wing Beat or something like that. But even that was just not hitting the right calcs, or even a Life Orb dual Wing Beat, because I don't have Life Orb anywhere else on this team. Was just not hitting the right calcs, but the Acrobatics with no item actually was, so was a little bit weird. I was not super convinced of it, but after the battle, I definitely was. Acrobatics did quite well. And then I also have, usually I run, fake tier stuff with Grimmsnarl. I've done that a lot with Special Celesteela. I actually decided to go for Self-Fire Punch into the weakness policy here, with Grimmsnarl being just 1 point faster than the Celesteela. I did that instead of the fake tier stuff, mostly because of Regirock. I was very worried about Regirock, and you can't fake tiers a clear body mon, so I figured my main way of just blowing that thing up was going for a +2 Steel Spike into it. So, and then I've got Raichu and Pelipper down here. Raichu and Pelipper basically never coming in game 1. They are mostly here, and they're probably not coming together either, which is why I don't have Thunder on Raichu. They're mostly here just to cover for like a rogue fire move or electric move coming out from, like, I don't know, Regirock with Fire Punch, Thunder Punch, Hitmonlee with Blaze Kick, which he actually brought. Volcarona is just a fire type. Kangaskhan gets the elemental punches, stuff like that. It was pretty much just in case one of those coverage moves proves to be too much for Celesteela, I can bring out either one of these to help support it, depending on which type it was. So, didn't actually need to bring them. The top 4 turned out to be enough. Going into Team Preview, lots of surprises here. No Regirock, which is a relief. No Rillaboom, which was... I was prepared for Rillaboom. But it's also, it's good that it didn't come. It's a dangerous mon, especially with Diggersby being an important part of the team here, and also no Meowstic. So no Meowstic was probably the biggest thing here, because it meant that I had the option to change up my leads if I wanted to, and the Celesteela Grimmsnarl actually looked pretty good here, so I decided to put Archeops and Diggersby in the back, so I went with that same mode both games. Game 1, I had a pretty solid start. Pretty major hiccup with Specs Volcarona coming in. I did not expect the choice Specs at all, but it turned out to be a really good decision. Just blew up my Celesteela, but I felt pretty capable of cleaning up with Archeops, since Rock Slide and Acrobatics, just flying and Rock just in general looked really good into John's team. I guess I should have mentioned that a little bit earlier. I have flying and Rock coverage on Archeops and Celesteela and Diggersby, although Diggersby's only using his flying coverage when it maxes. But it's like all of his main threats, like his main offensive threats here, if you're just looking at his whole draft, Rillaboom, Volcarona, Regirock, Hitmonlee, those are his main offense. 3 of those are weak to flying. And then I just had extra rock coverage, not only for spread damage, but also just in case I really need to blow up like a Dynamax Volcarona, something like that. And then, of course, I had super effective hits on Regirock with both Celesteela and Diggersby. So the type coverage here was a little bit easier based on what he drafted. So anyway, Archeops was able to clean up with the rock and flying coverage pretty easily. It was made a little bit easier by Grimmsnarl spreading paralysis too. And then in game 2, John actually adjusted pretty well and kind of ignored the Celesteela after seeing the weakness policy the first time, and just started beating down the Grimmsnarl so that I wasn't able to spread paralysis and set up screens as much as I wanted to. So he ended up doing quite a bit better in game 3. Archeops came in and saved the day, even though Hitmonlee was maxed and it still had its Koba Berry. That was kind of nuts. It was at maybe like 60-70%, and the acrobatics still killed it, so that was kind of amazing. And then Diggersby was able to clean up after that. There was a crucial Hydro Pump miss, which could have killed Diggersby. The miss basically guaranteed me the win as long as I hit my rock slides. But we did the calcs afterward based on the special attack stat that the Mantine had and the bulk I had on my Diggersby. The Hydro Pump was actually a 50-50 to one shot, so it was slightly in my favor just because I also had the chance for Hydro Pump to miss. Rock Slide could have missed as well, but it was a little bit more accurate than Hydro Pump, so little bit in my favor there, but that's how it turned out there. Going into week 9, so these cross division matches had me pretty worried, especially because I had to play the top 2 players in Red Division in the last 2 weeks. All of the other blue coaches won week 8, and in particular the ones who were on my tail gunning for the number 1 spot all won. I was X1 and they were all X2, so as long as I kept winning, I was safe, but I had some really tough matches coming up. That's a problem. So week 9, I'm playing Ryan. I actually came up with this Sawk Celesteela mode a few weeks prior. It seemed like he didn't have a whole lot to stop it based on the matchup it had, especially with the Assault Vest and with the coverage that I had on Celesteela. The Mega Horn was actually pretty big. It's something that I had not used before at all. So I thought it would be a pretty cool, pretty good surprise. I had come up with this combination a while before I was actually supposed to play Ryan. I had to kind of keep it under my hat for a little while, and I almost almost found myself building for this matchup just because I loved the coaching with Celesteela stuff so much when I really should have been focusing on my other matches, but it looked like it just had a really good matchup into Ryan's team. I had 2 different back modes. Sawk Celesteela was like pretty much always my lead here, and I had two modes that could go in the back. I had the Archeops Diggersby, just like last week, and then I had my rain mode. So on Archeops Diggersby, I had the luxury of running double ground, which was pretty cool, next to my flying type with Tailwind. I had Stone Edge over Rock Slide, really just for Moltres, because I was worried about a weakness policy Moltres. Like, yeah, I can hit it if it's next to Indeedee, but like, fuck, man, it's not going to be doing a lot of damage. It definitely won't one-shot, even if I have Life Orb. I'm just going to activate weakness policy, so I decided to put Stone Edge on there, even though Indeedee was a thing. That was the main reason I had Taunt on Archeops as well, in case I had that pair staring down an Indeedee Moltres. I could taunt the Indeedee and then probably just protect with Diggersby so that I could Stone Edge into the Moltres later on. And then the Endeavor here on Archeops is sort of like my version of offensive support. Like I mentioned earlier, it has Endeavor, which as long as you're down at low HP, functions kind of like a Screech or or a fake tears, you endeavor into something, and then you can just finish it off with whatever other moves you have. Then the ally switch was just kind of like, it also gives Archeops some usefulness when its HP is low, even though it has Defeatist. And then the ally switch was it was just ally switch. I didn't really need or want like an offensive move on there. It allowed me to support Celesteela a little bit in case, you know, Sawk goes down, Celesteela's boosted up quite a bit, and I can ally switch next to it while it's doing its thing. And then the rain mode, honestly, like the rain mode was a little bit weird because I wanted Sash on Pelipper and I wanted Life Orb on Ludicolo, but it was taken by the other two Mons. Pelipper was able to go without Sash a little bit better than Archeops was, and Archeops wanted it more for the Endeavor and because it just has shit bulk, whereas Pelipper actually has some bulk. Having a Charty Berry with like a pretty bulky EV spread allowed it to survive pretty much anything that's not an electric type move. The Tailwind's pretty self-explanatory. Scald, water coverage is good because I'm worried about Blaziken here. Rain Dance, just for like resetting the rain for both Ludicolo and Celesteela after a potential max flare. I had Ludicolo mainly for clean up and offense. It was mainly just Celesteela supposed to do its thing, and then Ludicolo comes in under rain and cleans up in the late game. I wanted Life Orb on it, but Life Orb just seems so much more important for Diggersby. I wanted Diggersby to be able to switch around its moves a little bit more because it's gonna have trouble if it's getting locked into a ground move and then Moltres comes out, something like that. It really needs to be able to Earthquake next to Archeops. Getting locked into Stone Edge is fucking dangerous. And it also needed to protect if I was gonna like taunt Indeedee so I could Stone Edge Moltres later. Ludicolo made use of a choice item a little bit better than Diggersby did. Just because I'm mostly just hitting stuff with rain-boosted water attacks. The Ice Beam and Energy Ball were really just coverage moves for, Haxorus, Slow King, that kind of thing. Mostly I was just clicking water moves, so I was more comfortable with Ludi being locked into something than Diggersby. So, going into team preview, a lot of this made sense. There were definitely some surprises. This is kind of normal, kind of unexpected. Frostlass and Slurpuff, I thought were both kind of maybes. I didn't really expect. My money was on neither of them coming. Both definitely seemed odd to me. Licky Licky was definitely surprising, but I made sure that my coaching combo had a way to beat the same belly drum stuff that he did with Indeedee, that he did against Grant. Turns out this was not that kind of set. I don't really remember what the thought process was behind this like Choppleberry body press kind of Licky Licky, but wasn't really much of a problem for me. The mons that I most expected to see instead of those three, the Slurpuff, Licky Licky, and Frostlass there, I most expected to see Raichu, Slowking, and Marowak in those slots. I was very pleased not to see Raichu because I decided not to bring Raichu here. I felt like my matchup against it was good enough. But still surprised not to see it. And then Slowking and Marowak. Marowak was something else that gave Celesteela a little bit of a hard time. If it had, Thunder Punch or Fire Punch, especially in Trick Room, was going to be moving first. But I was pretty okay with not seeing it. So there was really nothing about this team preview that was going to deter me from going with my regular mode. I don't think any team preview would have deterred me from the Sawk Celesteela mode. So I kind of did that for all three games, but this is one that I'm not really going to recap because there were just there's too much to describe in this game. It was one of the best games of the season, at least out of the ones that I played. It was really close. It went to a game 3. There were a lot of critical points, moving parts, momentum shifts. If I would recommend watching it if you haven't already. I'm sure everybody in the MDL has watched it. For anybody else watching this right now, all of my matches are on the Amoonguss Burnouts channel. Go find it, go watch it. It's a really crazy match. So that's all I'll say about that one. But I ended up winning just barely. It was I dropped a game. It was a 2-1 win. I won with a -1 differential, actually, because I think Indeedee killed itself to Life Orb damage. Blaziken killed itself with Flare Blitz recoil once or twice. It was kind of nuts. It was a crazy game. Moving on to week 10. So week 10, I was in a very weird spot. This team preview is going to look a little bit weird. You're not seeing Celesteela Grimmsnarl, even on the team preview for our drafts. And the reason for that was that our position at this point in the season was very weird, because all of the blue coaches who were on my tail won again in week 9. So I actually, the risk of me dropping to the wildcard slot if I lost in week 10 was actually very real, because they all had very winnable games in their last week. And I was going up against Maxwell, who was the #1 player in Red Division. So if they all won and I lost, there was a very good chance that I was going to actually drop all the way down from 1st seed to 4th. And then I would have to play in wildcard week. I don't get the buy into top 8 if that happens. So that kind of sucks. And I didn't really want to play a real game here, because Maxwell, I thought, was probably, like, he was clearly one of the most likely opponents I may have met up with in finals if I made finals. And I didn't really want to reveal, what I was actually going to do against his full team. Fortunately, before we ended up playing, I believe Charles lost against Burst this week, so it didn't really matter what I did. If I lost the game, I was still guaranteed 3rd seed at worst, and that still gives me the bye into top 8. So that was all fine. No problems there. So Maxwell and I agreed to... We still played a game. We agreed to do a low-tier match just for fun. So the rule here was that you could not bring any of your tier 1s, and you could only bring 1 tier 2. That's why there's an asterisk there next to all the tier 2s. So my approach to this game was mostly just rain mode looks good. His main counter to rain mode is Mr. Mime Hawlucha. It kind of feels like he's forced to do that, so I'm going to do what I can to use one of my tier 2s to counter that mode, because with all my tier 3s and below, I don't really feel like I can do anything against that. So I just ended up going with a Audino Regidrago lead, helping hand 150 base power Max Wormwind just fucking kills Dynamax Hawlucha. So and then the rest of my team was just general offense with the rain mode. Rain mode still looked good. I just put it in the back. Scarf Sawk, again, just general offense, trying to outspeed all the stuff. And then Archeops was kind of a meme. It just had the Focus Sash Endeavor thing, Ally Switch, Tailwind, Dragon Pulse to activate the weakness policy on the Regidrago. I thought that was kind of fun. But yeah, game 1, Regidrago just went in, did its job. It just blew up the Hawlucha. He did exactly what I thought he was going to do, and then the rain mode cleaned up later. Game 2, he made a pretty good adjustment, I thought. He put all his eggs in the Mawile basket. He ended up maxing the Mawile. And then he targeted around the Regidrago and tried to get me in a position where it was a 1v1 between Regidrago and Mawile, which was a pretty good idea. Once I kind of saw what he was doing, though, I was able to make some good plays, preserve some of the other Pokemon, just blow up everything else with Regidrago, and managed to pull out a win there. Not really a match that matters that much. This is the team preview, I guess. He actually didn't bring one of his tier 2s, which I found very curious. He said it was really just because none of them helped with the rain matchup. He had the Blacephalon I figured probably wasn't coming. Gigalith, it does reset the weather, but it's weak to water, and I can just max Geyser, so yeah, that's not great. Tangrowth, weak to flying. I have Pelipper, so I kind of get it. I still think it would have been better to put one of his tier 2s on there for something. Maybe like an Assault Vest Tangrowth boost up with Max Ooze or something. I don't know. Either way, I felt like I had a pretty good plan, pretty good matchup, but it didn't really matter much. This game, it was meant to be kind of just a fun, practice game, whatever. I ended up winning, and then so I was 8-1 with a plus 21 differential, first seed. Retained that first seed slot in Blue Division, so that's pretty cool. Going into playoffs, I finally got the piece that I wanted all along, that Hunter so rudely stole from me. He did not make playoffs, which was great for me because Crobat was available for pickup. You'll also notice that I was not really using my Cursola mode very much. I brought it once. I brought it against Charles, and that was it. Didn't really look any better than any of my other stuff. I drafted a good Celesteela comp, and that's what I was using pretty much the whole way through. So I didn't really feel like I needed that extra mode. It was mostly experimental anyway, like I said. It was just looked good on paper. I was curious to use it, never seen anyone draft it before. I got what I wanted to out of it. I got one Cursola sweep. That's really all I needed. And I felt like my Trick Room mode with Audino was actually still viable here, or rather my Trick Room option. With something like a Celesteela or a Grimmsnarl. So I actually still liked having Audino on here. The one Pokemon that I would have gotten rid of if I could have was the Archeops, because that was just meant as like a budget pick backup kind of thing for Crobat, because I didn't get Crobat, and now that I have Crobat, I don't really give a shit about Archeops anymore. So that's going to be the one Pokemon that you don't see in any team preview here for playoffs. I just kind of... It didn't really do anything. I considered it once for like one thing that I'll get to, but Crobat just made it kind of useless. But it was just such a good, it's just such a good glue support piece that enables a lot of the team having a little bit more speed than Archeops. Lets it be a more reliable Tailwind setter. Obviously, Inner Focus is huge. The main things I wanted it for were Tailwind, Weather, and Taunt. Those things I was very aware of when I wanted to draft it. A more recent discovery of mine was that it actually has access to Screech, which makes a lot more of my physical sets quite a bit more viable. So, and you'll see that in some of my playoff matchups as well. Inner Focus is good. It has a decent toolkit, even aside from the main things I wanted to use it for. It's got some other utility, like U-turn. It's got Haze, Quick Guard, stuff like that. Unfortunately, does not get Super Fang in Generation 8. That's a transfer move, which I only found out when I was prepping for Dan in top 4, but that's okay. It wasn't really a huge deal. I got what I wanted out of it anyway. And holy shit, this turned out to be an amazing playoff transaction. So top 8, I'm going up against Dina. She won her wildcard match against Jess, so she is my I'm the first seed, so she is my top 8 opponent. This is kind of a rematch, but I'm not super worried about our first match having too many implications regarding what I might bring this time. Mostly because the match is very different, because we both have 2 very new tools. We both have I have the Crobat, she has the Duraludon. I think the Duraludon for her, at least on paper here, is much more consequential than the Crobat is for me. That turned out to not be true once we actually got into the match, but we'll get to that. So I ran a very similar rain mode. I had the exact same speed stats on Ludicolo and Pelipper because Noivern is not here anymore. This time, instead of the Absorb Bulb stuff, I decided to go for Soak, replace the Ice Beam for Soak, and I put a Life Orb on Ludicolo because I don't think I had a Life Orb anywhere on my team previously, the first time I played against her. And the Soak with Life Orb calcs were really, really important. It was pretty easy to... I was most likely able to one-shot max Special Defense Clefable with a modest Life Orb max Overgrowth if I soaked it first. That was really important. Soak was good for the Duraludon, even if I was not really able to lock into Soak. I still had ground coverage. I still had a max Quake for it. I still had Surf on Pelipper even without the Absorb Bulb, mostly because I still had to cover for Clefable Cinderace, even though I thought with my Rain Mode, it's a very unlikely lead for her to go with. And I actually discovered the Pelipper does not have Muddy Water, so I had to go for Surf, which was fine. Ludicolo is double resistant to water, so it's fine if I'm hitting my Ludicolo with that. It's not a big deal. So that was my Rain Mode, but I also kind of figured that my Rain Mode was unlikely to be a lead here, mostly because of Duraludon, and she knew that I was leading Rain a lot in my first matchup, so she was probably going to hard prep for it. And it's, it has tools for Duraludon, but like the Soak stuff and like the Max Quake, but the matchup is still a little bit awkward. I actually planned for Crobat Diggersby to be my most likely lead. Crobat was just super, super good here. It just tied the whole team together. It had Tailwind. Obviously, that's amazing for pretty much everything here. It had Rain Dance, which was amazing for Raichu and Celesteela in particular, because it meant that I could have the benefits of Rain and still leave my Rain Mode on the bench. That was one of the things I sort of struggled with the first time I played against her. I never wanted to leave my Rain Mode on the bench, but super fast Rain Dance here allows me to do that. It's great for protecting Celesteela against fire attacks and for enabling Raichu to do damage with Thunder, so I get everything I want out of that core, these bottom four here, without having to actually bring the Pelipper if I don't want it. The Screech was amazing, especially with the wide lens. The accuracy on it boosted up to 93.5. That's super good. Almost as accurate as an Icy Wind, and you almost always expect Icy Wind to hit, right? And it really enabled me to run a physical Celesteela, which was really helpful because I was really confident she would go with the same Clefable she had last time, the super specially defensive one with the Babiri Berry. But I really, really liked the physical Celesteela's matchup, especially with Screech into her team, especially with a Clefable that doesn't have a whole lot of defense investment. Max Quake boosts were also really, really awesome. Celesteela does not have a special ground move, so that's one of the main draws of physical Celesteela. You get that Max Quake. And then the last move being Hypnosis. This was really just a filler move. I felt like, I don't really have a lot of other moves that you want to put on Crobat. I didn't really feel like I needed an offensive move, even though a lot of the time on like support mons like this, I don't really like not running an offensive move. It can be a little dangerous. But Hypnosis was just... we talked a lot about this in the server and in the breakdown after the match happened. It is Hypnosis is I maintain it is not a meme. It is not just bullshit RNG. It is a legitimate move to put there. I will elaborate on that a little bit later. But yeah, it was just a filler move to kind of disrupt mostly, and I figured, what, at least if I lose this match, I go out doing something fun, just spreading Hypnosis around. So it was fun for me anyway. Probably not fun for whoever may or may not be on the receiving end of it, but that's okay. Turned out to be really good, actually. The Raichu was mostly the same as last time. I felt like I wanted to put Eerie Impulse on Raichu and Wackenberry on the Celesteela, because of Duraludon Stalwart ignoring the Lightning Rod. That was a pretty... it turned out to be actually really, really important in Game 3. And that's pretty much the team. The Diggersby, I felt mostly comfortable having Earthquake as the only ground move, because I did want Rock Slide, I did want Body Slam. Body Slam especially for the Rotom, because the last time my ground type could not touch the Rotom at all, and having a stab neutral Body Slam is pretty nice, especially with Screech. So yeah, that's pretty much the team. Moving into team preview here. Most of this made sense to me. I was definitely surprised by the lack of Runerigus. I was kind of not really sure what the Escavalier was supposed to do here, but I was comfortable knowing that it was gonna be tough for her to bring Escavalier. One of the main reasons I wanted to bring special Celesteela was actually Escavalier, because Celesteela does not have a physical fire move. I think it used to get like Flame Charge, but that's pretty shitty, and it's a transfer move anyway, I think now, so it has to rely on Flamethrower. But Escavalier just didn't really seem like that big of a problem, and knowing that she like didn't have a full-on Trick Room mode here was kind of comforting. And I was also very relieved to not see Riolu, because actually coaching with Prankster Sunny Day was something I was a little bit concerned about here. That's also why I have Rain Dance on the Scarf Pelipper here again. But again, this is another one that... This was a really, really good match, I felt like. You know, somebody else watching it from a different perspective might not feel the same way based on how much work Hypnosis did. But frankly, the reason I said Hypnosis was not bullshit RNG here was because the odds of Hypnosis landing and the odds of getting a certain amount of sleep turns, it wasn't that much in my favor. I landed 6 out of 8 Hypnosis times I clicked Hypnosis, which was about 75%. It's 66 with Wide Lens, so it's a little bit above odds. But if you actually go back and count those sleep turns, they were actually a little bit in Dina's favor. Half of them were 1-turn sleeps. And then there was 1 3-turn sleep, 1 2-turn sleep, and another one that was either 2 or 3. I'm not sure. The Rotom went down before it had a chance to wake up. But yeah, I don't think I can say confidently that I did not hacks my way through this match with Hypnosis. The Hypnosis rolls were pretty much on odds with what you would expect to happen statistically. So with that in mind, if you have not seen this match already, I assume most or all players in MDL have seen it. If you're somebody else watching this breakdown, that's also on my channel. I believe that one's from Dina's perspective actually, but yeah, go ahead and check that out. It was a really good match, very close, went to 3 games. I did end up winning, and I advanced to top 4. Sorry about that. Having some technical difficulties here. We'll be right back. Okay, and we are back. Sorry about that. Back with top 4 versus Dan. Also refilled my water during the break because that is important when you're talking for 9 billion hours straight. All right, top 4 versus Dan. Dan happened to win his top 8 match versus Charles. This was definitely the top 4 matchup I had been expecting for a long time. We seem to be the 2 strongest in the division, so it makes sense that we meet up here in Blue Division Finals, essentially. So, my first thought on this matchup was Rain, because Ludicolo still seems really good into his team, and it is. However, I was aware that Dan would hard prep for Rain again, like he did last time. And he also didn't have Colossal, so I wasn't sure really how essential the Rain mode would be. Now I went with this self-swagger Ludicolo stuff. Ludi and Grimmsnarl was basically my lead every single time. Uh, I used this because Ludicolo still seemed good. I wanted other mons in these slots other than Pelipper, and really the rain mode was just it was good because Ludicolo was good, typing wise. So I'd had this combo kind of in my back pocket for a while. I never really expected to use it because I mean, it seems silly. Like, oh man, I'm gonna sweep him with physical Ludicolo, right? Like, no, its base attack is like 70, I think. It's terrible. That's awful. Uh, but with a free +2 and you're Dynamaxed, it turned out to be much better than I expected. I started to do some calcs. I started to do some work prepping this mode, expecting to see that it was actually kind of shitty, and I fully expected to just throw it out. But I thought, wow, what the hell? Let's just see if it'll work. And the matchup and the type matchups in particular, the Water Grass Ice on Ludicolo plus the +2 max move calcs just turned out to be way too perfect. And again, I figured, even if I lose this match, at least I go out in style because holy shit, that's cool. And who's expecting this kind of a wacky set to show up in a deep playoff run? So it felt like an own tempo blocks Intimidate, which he's definitely using now because I don't have Passimian or Mamoswine. So physical Ludicolo is even better because of that. So I figured, this seemed like the perfect time to use it. Even if it doesn't work, at least I get to go out in style, So I got to work on prepping the mode. Koba Berry seemed pretty essential given that he was using Tornadus to counter my Ludicolo last time. And he actually had Max Bug on his Azelf, which is pretty good. But I was more focused on the Tornadus since that was a big threat from last time and seemed to work as well. That, and I don't think he probably was not expecting the Koba Berry, I imagine. So I had the Crobat Diggersby as another mode. This is the mode that I most expected to be my back pair. The Audino Celesteela was kind of secondary. Weird to say that Celesteela was secondary, but I was kind of high on some other modes here. So, but it was still the Celesteela Trick Room option was still good. The Crobat, I had Poison Fang mainly to hit Primarina because Primarina is a little bit of a problem for Diggersby. It's a solid 2-shot. I was originally going to have Super Fang in that slot, but again, that's a transfer move, which I found out when I was prepping for this match. Screech and Tailwind were pretty essential. They just enabled Diggersby to do what it wants to do. Pretty straightforward what those are for. Hypnosis again was really just filler. It was just a move that was kind of like, well, I don't want Crobat to be useless. At least it has an attack, but there's going to be some circumstances where doing damage from that slot is not really important, and it doesn't do enough damage to kill something. Maybe it might be good to just put some shit to sleep because it's at least very threatening, even if it's not very reliable. So again, kind of a filler move. Diggersby, I really wanted double ground coverage on Diggersby, but I felt like the ice and dark coverage was too important, especially for the things that were immune to ground. And in case you're wondering, yes, huge power does actually boost foul plays damage. It seems a little bit counterintuitive because huge power boosts your own attack stat, so you would think that hitting something with foul play when the target has huge power, that's going to double foul plays damage. Doesn't actually work that way, weirdly enough. It's your own items and your own ability that boosts foul play's damage, not the opponent's. So you are doing double damage with foul play, which is kind of cool. It's even more powerful than a stab foul play. So that's interesting. It was really nice against his elf, and I was not really expecting the physical set, but given that he was a physical set, yeah, it was gonna do some major damage if I actually brought that thing out. The Celesteela Audino was mostly just a back pair in case Dan didn't have a Trick Room mode. It was either that or if I felt like he was, even if I saw Caparajah and Cofagrigus in Trick Room, if I felt confident that he wasn't going to bring it to, let's say, Game 2 or Game 3, then Celesteela Audino is a viable pair in that scenario as well. Celesteela is mostly the same set. I switched out the what did I have? Akaberry last time for a Power Herb here, and I switched out the grass coverage for Air Slash. That was mostly because I just needed. I knew that Celesteela was not likely to be a max option here, given what I was doing for with Ludicolo. Those were both my two max options last time I played against Dan, but Ludicolo here seemed like more of an essential Dynamax option than it did before with this particular set. So I wanted to make sure I had a way to actually hit Arcanine with a ground or with a rock move in one turn without having to max. So that's where the Power Herb came from. And then just in case he was running some kind of different set, because I didn't necessarily expect Choice Band again, it was definitely on my radar because of course he used it before. But I figured if he's running some kind of a different set, he protects on the Meteor Beam. I don't want to just have grass and fire coverage against an Arcanine because that sucks. So I wanted to have an Air Slash there, even though it's not going to one-shot a lot of Arcanines. Even if I'm at +1 from the Meteor Beam, it was still a hell of a lot better than just having basically nothing left to hit it. So that was the thought process there. And the Audino. The Dazzle was just so I had some kind of attacking move. Having spread damage was nice. I considered Hyper Voice for stab, but Audino's not doing a whole lot of damage anyway, stab or otherwise, so it doesn't really matter, and I just really didn't want to get walled by like a Cofagrigus or something. Maybe Cofagrigus only has a ghost move and I can hit it and it can't, and we're down to a 1v1, something like that. So that's the thought process behind Dazzling Gleam. The other moves are pretty self-explanatory. Trick Room was for the Celesteela this time, because it underspeeds everything as long as he doesn't have his own Trick Room mode. Except for the Tangela, I had a little bit of I didn't expect min speed Tangela, so I just used a weird speed IV, so I could barely underspeed a neutral speed Tangela. And still potentially benefit from max Airstreams if I happen to max the Celesteela, which did happen, so thank God for that. And then the safety goggles on Audino, in retrospect, probably not the best item there. It was mostly just because I felt like the Trick Room mode was less likely to come out, and I was swapping back and forth between Mental Herb on Crobat or Mental Herb on Audino, but I wanted to get my Tailwind up without being taunted by Tornadus. So so I felt like Crobat with a Mental Herb was a little bit more important. Safety Goggles was just because, like, well, if I can't stop Taunt, what else is going to be able to stop my Trick Room? Sleep Powder from Tangela, so let's just make me immune to Sleep Powder. That'd be good. In retrospect, you know, if I knew that Dan was not bringing his Trick Room mode, spoiler alert, there's the team preview. He doesn't have his Trick Room mode, so I do end up bringing the Celesteela Audino. If I knew that was happening, I guess I'll leave it there. If I knew that was happening, I probably would have put the Mental Herb on Audino. Looking back, even if I capped the Mental Herb on Crobat, maybe like a Citrus Berry on Audino would have been good, because there was a situation where he was trying to double up on Audino in order to stop Trick Room. The Citrus Berry wouldn't have helped because the move he ended up missing a Heat Wave, and that wouldn't have put me into Citrus range. But for, you know, another similar scenario like that, I think Citrus Berry probably would have been more generally better. But, you know, Safety Goggles was okay too. Probably doesn't really matter that much. I figured I didn't really need Citrus Berry because I can survive any one attack. But yeah, the double up was potentially a problem in some situations. Worked out fine though. So looking at team preview, most of the stuff was expected. A lot of it's the same stuff that he brought last time, especially with these four. These four that he's selecting here on the screen are the same four that he brought in both games last time, because he had Cofagrigus and Caparaja in the Azelf and Tangela slots. So he's bringing the same stuff here. Makes sense to me. Azelf felt like a bit of a coin flip. It was kind of a 50-50 to me on whether or not it was going to come, and if it did come, I wasn't really sure what it was going to do. But I think Dan brought the right set. It was definitely a good set, especially given he had Screech, wide lens Screech on the Purloin. Tangela was a little bit more surprising. It didn't occur to me at first that it might have a Focus Sash. I just remember talking to Dan after our last match, and he mentioned that like Tangela's defensive calcs were pretty bad. It just wasn't surviving the stuff that he needed it to survive. So I figured it wasn't coming. But given that's the reason he didn't want to put it on his team previously, it makes a hell of a lot of sense that it's carrying a Focus Sash here. So with that in mind, it's not surprising that he brought it. Okay. And also, yeah, like I said, no Trick Room. So Celesteela Audino just became way more viable because there is no Caparaja Cofagrigus. So game one, so I decided to put the Trick Room mode in the back. That was my plan. So I'm leaving Crobat Diggersby on the bench. Game one, if you haven't seen this already, go see it. I'll still tell you. I'll still recap it a little bit, but this was the craziest combo I may have ever pulled off in draft. I got the Swagger off into my Ludi. He tried to fake Tears Max Airstream into my Ludicolo with Tornadus. He was very confident that he could live any hit from a special Ludicolo, but he did not account for +2 physical Ludicolo. I lived the Airstream because of the Koba Berry, and +2 Max Hailstorm knocked out the Dynamax Tornadus, and Ludicolo actually lived through the entire match. It ended up killing the Arcanine, it killed the Primarina late game. The execution was just perfect. I had no idea it was actually going to work out that well, but it was absolutely fucking perfect. It was insane. Game 2, he made a good adjustment. He went out, he still led the Purloin, he went out to the Azelf instead. Tried to go for the Screech and Max Bug into Ludicolo. I think it was a pretty good adjustment. I was able to play defensively a little bit, start spreading some paralysis. I was able to stall out the Max pretty well. And then in the late game, I ended up setting up Trick Room, and then got a late game sweep with my own Dynamax Celesteela. So that is a 2-0 win for me in top 4. And we're moving on to finals. Finals against Ryan. So, with this match, I wasn't expecting to see Ryan in finals, partly because I wasn't really expecting to make finals myself. But during the pre-playoff transactions, I noticed that he dropped his Blaziken for a Azumarill, and that kind of I was turning my head a little bit at that, and I didn't really know why he was doing that, but like the first thing that made me think was, holy shit, if I meet him in finals, Sawk Celesteela with this, even just the same exact mode, Sawk Celesteela just got way better, because now he doesn't even have his fire type. The only thing he has to hit Celesteela is the Raichu. So going into this matchup, I'm going back to that line of thought and thinking, okay, well, it probably doesn't hurt to just go with the same mode. I even tried mixing up the coverage moves on Celesteela a little bit, and nothing else. I thought I maybe didn't need Stomping Tantrum because the Blaziken was gone, and I could still lower the Raiku's special attack with Max Bug, but it was still better than anything else. I considered like Superpower for Max Knuckle. What else did I consider? Fly for Max Airstream. Maybe something else. Seed Bomb for Max Overgrowth, because he's got a lot of grass weaknesses with the Azumarill, Marowak, Slowking. So, but this was still the best moveset as far as I was concerned. For the same Celesteela mode. Now, I knew that this was a mode that he had a lot of trouble with in our first game. It's not something that he was incapable of dealing with, but it gave him a lot of trouble, enough to the point where I was really, really confident that he really had to hard prep for it. And if he didn't, then I still had it in my arsenal, and I could still roll over him with that mode. So I figured, all right, he's got a hard prep for the Sawk Celesteela mode. And I was looking at his potential counters, and it looked like his best options were some combination of really big debuffs combined with like a offensive max threat next to it. And I thought his best option for that was actually there were a bunch of different things that I had considered, but the best option to me seemed like Frostlass with Will-O-Wisp, Fake Tears, and Ice Shard next to Dynamax Weakness Policy Moltres. I actually had a lot of problems with that with the Celesteela mode. And so I kind of figured, all right, so I need to put the Celesteela mode on my team, but also add another mode that is able to counter his counters. The offensive Grimmsnarl mode with the Crobat just turned out to be absolutely perfect. The physical fairy coverage versus Moltres was amazing. The Life Orb calcs, especially with Screech, were just absolutely perfect. Even without Screech, the Max Starfall one-shots a Dynamax Moltres. The Taunt was really important for just stopping weird bullshit from like Frostlass or from Slurpuff, or stopping Indeedee's redirection, which is also what the Pyapa Berry was here for. I wanted to be able to taunt the Indeedee and survive until the next turn, so Crobat could continue to support the Grimmsnarl. The grass coverage was just fantastic, given his grass weaknesses with Azumarill, Marowak, and Slowking. So this actually ended up being my main mode after I figured out how insane of a matchup it had into him. Even though I absolutely loved the Celesteela mode, the fact that he's going to hard prep for the Celesteela and the perfection that is this Crobat with offensive Grimmsnarl, it just made that the primary mode. It was just so good. And against like for example, against the Frostlass, I had a lot of ways of just countering the stuff that I thought he would use to counter Celesteela. Like against the Frostlass Moltres, it was a very easy just Tailwind Max Starfall into Moltres. If the Moltres maxes, it still dies. The Grimmsnarl is fast enough to get the Starfall off first. So I'm setting up Misty Terrain, so he can't even burn my Grimmsnarl. If there's some other weird stuff that the Frostlass breaks out, Crobat's faster with Taunt. I just had a really good matchup into so many different things he could have done. So I essentially took my previous team comp and adjusted it a little bit. The first part was just replacing my old Tailwind setter with the new one. Fuck the Archeops. Crobat's amazing, so it's going to occupy that slot. Next, I had to make room for the Grimmsnarl, because Grimmsnarl didn't make an appearance the last time I played against Ryan at all. So I scrapped the Rain mode because it didn't seem as necessary since he didn't have Blaziken anymore. It was still good. It still could have done some good stuff, but I liked everything else more. And so that made room for the Grimmsnarl. I also want to talk about some of my decisions on Grimmsnarl a little bit. Life Orb just helped with Calix. Power Whip is great coverage, but Spirit Break, there was kind of a debate between Spirit Break and Play Rough. I actually initially thought that the Max Starfall from Spirit Break was weaker, but it's not. They're both 130 base power, so that was kind of a no-brainer once I realized that. It's just a much more reliable move. It'll still one-shot a Moltres outside of Max, so pretty good. Darkest Lariat more just for consistent dark type damage against like Indeedee and Slowking, that kind of thing. I went with the G-Max form mostly because like this team is almost entirely physical. I have one special attack on this team, and it's just Electro Web on Raichu. So Max Darkness was just, I didn't need it at all. I wasn't getting anything out of special defense drops, and the yawn effect was a little bit weird with the Max Starfall. But it was much better than special defense drops, especially given that he had a couple of flying types, only one flying type, and I'm only hitting it with Max Starfall. So it's not great, but neither is the darkness effect. I also had a couple of I was able to foresee a few situations where I could go for the G-Max snooze on something. It gets drowsy, and even if Misty Terrain is up, I can go for Max Overgrowth the next turn and override Terrain, and it falls asleep. So that was a good thing I could do as well. So yeah, I fully stand by G-Max over regular here. And then so I scrapped the. I did have Diggersby last time, kept the Diggersby, changed the item out mostly because I thought that Raikou was much more essential than last time because he didn't have his Blaziken, so Raikou was the one thing he had in order to hit Celesteela with a stab super effective hit. And I was pretty worried about Scald from the Raikou, which is really what the Pasho Berry is for. This Diggersby, I didn't have a lot of bulk on this Diggersby. It still died to even with Pasho Berry, it went down to a Max Geyser from Azumarill, so it was purely just for the Raikou Scald. And then since I scrapped the entire Rain mode to get Grimmsnarl onto the team, I had one more slot open, and that went to Raichu. Also, for the same reason I put Pasho Berry on Diggersby, Raikou just seemed much more important. And since I didn't have Raichu last time, I felt like him making a call to bring his Raikou in a potential situation where I might not have my Lightning Rod would have been. It was a call I expected him to make. So having Raichu here was very, very helpful. So going into team preview. Since I was just talking about Raikou, you'll notice there's no Raikou here, which is really the main surprise that I found here. Everything looked pretty normal. It was almost completely what I expected. I was maybe a little bit surprised by like the Slurpuff over the Frostlass, but wasn't a huge deal. Like it wasn't a problem for me. I could still deal with it. I kind of half expected Slowking to show up, mostly just because, like, Azumarill and Marowak just really didn't feel great outside of Trick Room. So I kind of felt like he needed to put Slowking somewhere. I wasn't really sure where he would fit it. It didn't seem like there would be a good spot for it on the team, given what else he needed and what else I expected him to bring. And then, yeah, no Raikou was really the major surprise. I didn't really expect Haxorus at all. I didn't really care that much because my Grimmsnarl and Celesteela did fine against it. It was decent against Rain, I suppose, but, if that's what he was bringing it for, that's fine with me. I don't have Rain, so my two main max options do fine against it. Yeah, really just expected Raikou to be in that slot. which and the fact that it wasn't also kind of meant that Raichu was a little bit useless here. It was like the one mon that was maybe kind of sort of guaranteed not to show up, especially because he has his own lightning rod, and I don't. There's not really much that my lightning rod needs to protect me from. He did end up revealing Max Lightning on the Marowak, but yeah, that's not enough reason to bring the Raichu. So, game one, my Grimmsnarl mode did pretty well. There was kind of a wrench thrown into my plans on turn one when he did reveal that Max Lightning. He ended up killing the Crobat a lot earlier than I was comfortable with. I really wanted Crobat to stick around a little bit longer. But then I was able to bring in Diggersby, and I went for a high horsepower Max Grass into the Marowak, and the fact that picked it up really saved my game there. And then Diggersby and Grimmsnarl were just able to clean up pretty well. Moltres almost he had a win con with Moltres there at the end because he was Charty Berry, so he was able to live a Stone Edge, and if he was able to get a bunch of flinches, then he could have maybe pulled it out. But I had Celesteela in the back with AV, and he was at a range that just meant he was going to go down to a straight up heavy slam, so I didn't even have to risk a rock slide miss. So he had to just keep flinching over and over, and Celesteela didn't even need to come out. It was more just like, just in case of the bad RNG, Celesteela was there, and I was probably going to be fine. So, but Grimmsnarl was able to close it out with a Spirit Break on the Moltres. Game 2, Crobat and Grimmsnarl just did their jobs. I was able to blow up the Max Azumarill with a Screech Overgrowth relatively easily. The Slurpuff was a little bit annoying. It ended up paralyzing my Crobat. It charmed my Grimmsnarl, but my Grimmsnarl still was able to get another KO before its max was over. Managed to predict a switch into the Moltres from the Marowak, and even though I had been charmed already, I was still able to one shot the Moltres because I knew that neutral Life Orb Max Starfall would KO Dynamax Moltres, so -2 attack was able to kill non-Dynamax Moltres. So, and then after that, Crobat and Diggersby were able to clean up pretty effectively. Celesteela was in the back again. It actually never hit the field, interestingly enough. But yeah, that's just how good the Grimmsnarl mode was. Looking back on this match, in retrospect, I sort of feel like after that first match we played, I was in a pretty serious power position, and not just because I won. I feel like I would have been in the same position even if I had lost our previous match, just because the Celesteela mode was something he had such a tremendous amount of trouble with. So I felt like prep for this match was him kind of being forced to hard prep for the Celesteela mode, while I was able to manufacture this extra thing that countered his counters to the Celesteela mode. I felt like I was able to be one step ahead of him, or at least, I mean, I don't think I felt that way in prep, but looking back, I think that's, especially knowing what he brought, I think that's probably what happened. So, yeah, so that resulted in a 2-0 win, and yours truly became the MDL Season 3 champion, 2-time MDL champion. Pretty good. So that's the end of the season. I'm going to go into a little bit of team reflection now. This is something I didn't do last time, but I'd like to talk about the team a little bit, kind of my thoughts on what I liked, what I didn't like, what my experimentation produced, and that sort of thing. So the first thing I've got to address is this fucking Celesteela team composition, because it was ridiculous. I think the plan that I set out with for the the lightning rod, the ground type, the prankster, the rain mode, having all of that with Celesteela was just amazing, and it enabled Celesteela to be absolutely fucking unstoppable so many times. Which is why it looks like, maybe Celesteela carried the season. And, I guess you can say it did, but it never would have done that on its own. It did that because it had a crazy good supporting cast. I frankly don't think you can... I don't think you could have a better Celesteela team comp than this. If you had, a draft without tiers or something, maybe you could add some more stuff. The only things I could think of were some of the things I listed here. Maybe you have a lower tier prankster user, like a Lipard, and then you fill that other tier 1 slot with something a little bit more offensive. Maybe you include a more solid Trick Room mode with a dedicated sweeper, which I kind of had, but Cursola was a little bit weird. I'll talk about that too. And I also feel like it's hard to have a solid, dedicated, hard Trick Room mode without some kind of redirection, which I did not have on this draft. And that was, like I said, that was very intentional. So I think those are some things that could probably make the draft better. But again, like the Trick Room mode, the redirection, I don't really know where you would put all that stuff. I feel like I kind of got lucky with a semi-solid Trick Room setter in Tier 4 with that Audino. Most of the good Trick Room setters are going to be in Tier 3, and Trick Room sweepers too, frankly, and since I had 2 of my Tier 3 slots filled up by my rain mode, I couldn't afford that. I couldn't get something like Runerigus and Drampa or something like that. I couldn't get that, since they were both tier 3. Even though I did consider that Cofagrigus Snorlax thing, but and I think a lot of what enabled me to have this kind of a crazy team composition was the fact that Pelipper and Ludicolo were tiered too low. And I fully intended to take advantage of that, which I did. Frankly, having Pelipper and Ludicolo on my squad with all this extra shit in tiers 1 and 2, having that all together, it was it didn't feel fair at times. I felt like I had 5 tier 2s, really. It was nuts. And again, I also feel like that's maybe why this same team comp is going to be really hard to recreate in the future, at least in MDL, because I think we get that Pelipper and Ludicolo should not be tier 3 anymore. I mean, we're even rolling back to 4 tiers in this next season, and we put them both up in tier 2. So, they should not have been in tier 3. And Ludicolo actually turned out to be far more versatile than I expected. I brought it without Pelipper 3 different times. One of those times it didn't actually hit the field, but that's okay. And it was still kind of meant to be a rain sweeper. That was the Raichu Ludicolo lead that I had planned against Charles. It didn't come out, but that's okay. I still had the Amnesia Leech Seed stall thing that I used against Toxic. I used the Physical Self-Swagger thing against Dan in top 4. I didn't expect to be doing all this weird shit with Ludicolo, but it's a cool mon. You look at Ludicolo and you're like, well, it's a rain sweeper. What else does it do? That's what I thought even when I drafted it. And then I discovered all this other interesting shit it could do. It's not something that I would expect to come out on most Ludicolo comps, but it's got a couple of options, and they're pretty cool. Crobat is the next thing we'll talk about. Crobat is I knew it was going to be good on my team comp, but I had no idea how good. I think it's fair to say I probably got more out of my pre-playoff transaction than anybody else did. The Crobat just enabled so much of my team. It made it way easier to go with physical sets on like physically offensive sets on a lot of other Pokemon. It made Diggersby way better. It enabled physical Celesteela. It enabled offensive Grimmsnarl, which I hadn't pulled out until finals. The Tailwind with Screech combo was. I mean, if you look at let's look at all these pastes. What's common among all of my Crobat sets? This one has Tailwind Screech. Again, Tailwind Screech. Tailwind Screech. Yeah, some of them have Hypnosis. I put Rain Dance on there once. I had Cross Poison a couple of times. There was one with Taunt. But Tailwind Screech were the constants here. So I can't express how good that combination was, especially with the rest of the stuff that I had. Now, I do kind of wonder if I had Crobat from the beginning. Let's say it didn't get sniped and I actually was able to put it in that last tier 3 slot, and I had Crobat for the entire season. I do really wonder if that would get stale, because really Crobat's move pool is actually kind of shallow. It's really good at doing what it does, but it doesn't do a lot of different things. So I think if I spent a few games doing what I did in my 3 playoff matches, people would probably hard prep for that Crobat stuff a little bit more, and it might get a little bit stale. It might feel like I might be more the counters to that sort of a set might be more visible to me, and I might be less willing to bring it as time went on. So Crobat through the course of an entire season may not have been as good as it was for me in playoffs here, but holy shit, it was maybe a season-winning transaction. It was really amazing. And since we're on the topic of Crobat, yes, let's talk about the elephant in the room here, Hypnosis. So, I went over when I was talking about my top 8 match. I went over why I stand by the idea that I did not use Hypnosis to hack Dina in top 8. I stand by that. But now there's a question of like, what's Hypnosis really doing on the set? Is it a legitimate move? Is it actually good? Is it just some bullshit RNG thing? Is it a meme? And I would argue, no, it's not just bullshit RNG. It's not a meme. It's actually definitely good, especially on Crobat, and I'll tell you why. And this is probably something you've heard me say before, but fuck it, I'm going to say it again because this has been a point of contention, and I'm standing by my position. Having any kind of a high-risk, high-reward move like Hypnosis, usually it's something with a really powerful effect, but with low accuracy. Having a move like that on a Pokemon that is at risk of sitting on the field doing nothing is really fucking good. Dan used Fissure on his Diglett, which I think is another great example. You know, Diglett's a shitty, not fully evolved Pokemon. He was just using it for beat up on his Justified Arcanine. It wasn't really there to do anything, but if you put Fissure on it and you click it, it doesn't even really matter that much if it misses. It lets your opponent know that you've got something really threatening on this Pokemon that previously looked like it wasn't going to do anything. And they have to address it, because they're thinking, fuck, if something hits me with that Fissure, I'm going down, and that's going to be really bad if I lose one of my essential Mons just because he gets a good roll. I need to address the Diglett. That's something that I never thought I would hear anybody say before I started thinking about this idea. But yeah, when that happens, you need to address the Diglett. When Crobat uses Hypnosis, you need to address the Crobat. And Crobat's definitely a Mon that I think is at risk of just sitting on the field doing nothing. Like I said, it doesn't really have a super deep move pool. There's a lot of there's stuff it can do, and it's really good at doing it, especially just Inner Focus Tailwind with 130 base speed. That's fucking nuts. That's awesome. But if it doesn't really have a way to support you offensively, it might just sit there and it fires off a Cross Poison, I guess. Maybe, what if nothing on the field gets taunted? What if doing damage doesn't put anything in range of another attack, doesn't KO anything. Like, Crobat is definitely a Pokemon that's at risk of sitting there doing nothing, and Hypnosis really alleviates that problem. And it has the same. It's maybe even more dangerous than something else that's like really slow and bulky and happens to have an Oko move or something, because it's fast and you need to start addressing it immediately. And because of that speed, it might be too late if even if it lands a Hypnosis on the wrong Pokemon. So it's really good. I think Hypnosis Crobat is a legitimate strategy. It's genuinely good. If you don't think so, that's fine. People are wrong about all sorts of things, so that's okay. Anyway, moving on. So here I've got kind of a list of some interesting sets and combinations and modes that I didn't really. I had a lot of trouble with a lot of the stuff that's listed here. Stall Celesteela. I started to draft a little bit around Stall Celesteela, especially like with the stupid Rapidash, because I wanted to heal pulse myself, and the stupid Salazzle with corrosion toxic. I thought, I could stall something out with like a bulky set like that. It wasn't really good. Maybe. It might still be good on the right team. I had screens, I had some other stuff. I think maybe the one way to do it was like Iron Defense Celesteela next to Max Quake Diggersby, something like that. That might have been good. Maybe it comes down to what I'm comfortable with and how I preferred to use the team, and what I thought was optimal given what I drafted. There might be a world where even with this team, or perhaps with another Celesteela comp, where a stall version of Celesteela might actually be better. But I also kind of feel like it's maybe just an outdated set. It was pretty common to use bulky stall Leech Seed Celesteelas back in Gen 7, and I think that was just because it wasn't a Dynamax format. Celesteela is a different animal now, because it has a lot more trouble outlasting your opponent when you've got a big Dynamax threat on the other side of the field. And it's a really, really powerful Dynamax threat itself. I Dynamaxed it almost every fucking week. So there was that that part of it is that I just lost. I lost the offense the Celesteela offers if I was going to go with a more stall Leech Seed kind of set. But more than anything, I do really feel like it was... it's kind of an outdated set, so in retrospect, it's not really that surprising that I never really felt like I could use it that well. Offensive Grimmsnarl here. Well, we know how well that did in finals, but before I had Crobat, I just really felt like I didn't have the tools that I needed to enable it. I guess I could have put it next to Archeops, because a big part of what holds back offensive Grimmsnarl is its awkward speed, so I could have put Tailwind next to it, but the Tailwind there is much less reliable. Archeops doesn't have the same kind of support that Crobat offers. It does have Taunt, I guess. It's got, Ally Switch, Tailwind, that kind of shit. But the speed on Crobat makes a huge difference, and as does Screech. I know I was talking about Endeavor sort of working kind of sort of the same way as Screech and Fake Tears, but it's not as reliable because you got to get hit first. If you're not at low HP, it's not going to work. It's not going to work as well. But Screech, you can just click it and boom, -2 defense. I mean, it's a little bit unreliable because it's only 85 accuracy, but put a wide lens on it, you'll be fine. Even if you don't, it's okay. It's not too bad. Regidrago is something that was I think noticeably absent from a lot of my battles. There were a couple of times when it was actually really good, but I think there were only 3 times in the whole season that I actually brought it. It had a great showing right off the bat in week 1, but I found it very difficult to use with the team. I don't really... it's in theory, it's better with Crobat. But I also didn't feel like any of my finals matches or any of my playoff matches were really allowed Regidrago to show up. So I never really got to use them together, which is a little bit unfortunate. I also feel like, Crobat or not, I feel like this team composition is probably not optimal for a Regidrago. I do have a better idea of what an optimal Regidrago team comp does look like. I think I'll keep that to myself for now in case I might want to use it at a later date. But I like a Dragon type in that slot, but I think maybe a different Dragon type might have been better. Drago was good for what I used it for, but it was really hard to fit during my prep on a lot of my teams. Mamoswine is garbage. If you can make a team with Mamoswine and it actually does well, like, props to you, man. It didn't work, at least on this team. In theory, kind of like Regidrago, in theory it's better with Crobat, but the ice typing is still so fucking rough. I still prefer Diggersby even if I have Crobat here. If I had a chance to trade him back after getting the Crobat, I absolutely would stick with Diggersby. The ice typing was just, it's so rough when you're weak to a couple of the types that you're trying to hit for super effective damage with your ground moves. If you've got a team where you can more reliably hit steel and fire types with other stuff on your team and Mamoswine is less essential, then maybe it's okay. But then it's also like, what is Mamoswine there for? Is it really that good if you don't need it for that? But being weak to those types, like, yeah, you have thick fat, so you're not always weak to fire, but sometimes you need the Oblivious because Intimidate's a bitch, man. So, but the steel types in particular is really what got me. There were a lot of really, really powerful steel types in Blue Division, and I needed my Mamoswine to hit them, and it just fucking couldn't, especially that goddamn Heatran and the Togedemaru. Togedemaru is not, like, it's a tier, 3? It's not even, like, a crazy mod, but it was tough for my team to deal with. And I had to use up my item slot on the Mamoswine to make sure that I didn't get one-shot because I'm weak to steel and I'm slower than it. So I had to put a goddamn Berry on it. It was terrible. So that's about all I have to say about that. Fuck Mamoswine. I love Diggersby. That's about it. And like I said, if you can find a good team comp for Mamoswine, do it. I'm not telling you that Mamoswine is bad. I'm not telling you that we should drop it a tier. I'm not saying anything like that. If you think it's a good mon, it works on your team, props to you. I'm hoping somebody does something good with it because I didn't. And last we've got Cursola. So Cursola is I still think it's a really cool mon. But it's harder to use than I expected, for sure. And that's not just because my Trick Room mode was an afterthought. Maybe that's part of it. But the abilities make it a little bit difficult to use. You're basically forced to run Perish Body because the alternative is Weak Armor, which you can do if you have, like, a beat up set. Back in early VGC 2020, I saw some fast Cursolas that would get up to that would have a weakness policy and get up to +6 speed with weak armor and beat up. That was kind of cool. It's not something I was able to do. I didn't have beat up on anything. I was kind of looking for a beat up user just to try that out, and there just wasn't one that I could afford taking. But you're basically forced to run Perish Body, which is kind of a fun ability. It's interesting, it's unique, but that also means that, like, one of the things that I think would be really good with Cursola is a weakness policy set with a Trick Room setter like Runerigus, for example, that can use Brutal Swing to activate Cursola's weakness policy. But that's terrible with both of Cursola's abilities. You either increase Cursola's speed, which is terrible, you're under Trick Room, or you cause the Perish counter to start. So on both your Brutal Swing user and your Cursola, that sucks, especially because you're probably wanting your Cursola to be your big Dynamax threat, and you're still gonna have what, like, maybe that wouldn't be so bad, because you still get your 3 turns of Dynamax before you go down, but it's still, you get 1 extra turn after that as well. So you're lasting most or all of the way through Trick Room, I guess. So, but it's still awkward. Still definitely awkward. The defense stat is a problem. It's a real problem. It has a great special defense stat, but if it's your Dynamax threat, you're definitely at risk if your opponent has a big physical attack. And it also has, this last point is not something I experienced because my Trick Room setter was Audino. But you're often going to have a lot of shared weaknesses between Cursola and your Trick Room setters, because most Trick Room setters are Ghost or Psychic. That's kind of it, except for like the odd, Audino or Porygon 2 or what's the Kling Clang or something weird like that. Most of them are Ghost and Dark, not Dark. Ghost and Psychic, so they're gonna share those Ghost and Dark weaknesses with Cursola. So that's a little bit weird to have on your Trick Room mode. So I think the Cursola is gonna end up being a lot better with with something like an Audino or maybe a Porygon 2 or something like that. So something to keep in mind if you're ever interested in drafting a Cursola. I think that would be pretty good, and it's really nice next to the normal typing, because you get some good defensive synergy there, especially since Audino, Porygon 2, shit like that has access to Ally Switch, so that's fun. All right, now I'm gonna finish off with a couple of fun things. These are really just some sets and combos I didn't get to use. Some of them I talked about on the last slide, so we can breeze through those. Leech Seed Stall, Celesteela, something I really loved in VGC 17. Not something that I was able to really use here, but that's okay, because Celesteela was still a boss. Crobat, Regidrago. Crobat was... Regidrago, I should say, was really the main reason that I wanted Crobat initially. Because I needed that reliable Tailwind so that Regidrago could just do what it does more reliably. Didn't get to use that because I only had Crobat for a few weeks. There were a couple of things I wanted to do with my Rain mode. I wanted to try a U-turn into a weakness policy Ludicolo. I did run U-turn on Pelipper 1 week, but I never had policy Ludicolo. And this U-turn could be on Pelipper or even a Crobat U-turn, because you can't get faked out. You're super fast. You can just U-turn yourself and then go straight into the Pelipper so that you got your Rain mode on the field with your weakness policy activated. Or you can go for Scarf Pelipper, self U-turn into like that. That would be best with a redirector if you have Pelipper, set the Rain, activate your policy, and then U-turn into a redirector. That would be pretty sweet. Scarf Soak Pelipper with the slow Ludicolo. I did build that and brought it to my top 8 match. I just listed it here because it was something that never hit the field, so I still counted as something that I didn't get to use. This next one is just a total meme. I really wanted to try a Scarf Simple Beam Audino with Meteor Beam Archeops to get rid of the Defeatist, and then you get +2 special attack on your Meteor Beam, and then if Archeops is still safe later on, you can Dynamax it and get like +2 speed on the max Airstreams because it gets Air Slash. And I guess I'll use this opportunity to say that special Archeops just in general is something I wish I got to use more. The Meteor Beam Heatwave set against Jess was something I really wish I got to bring out, but since she didn't bring Incineroar, it was almost never coming to the battle. Weakness Policy Grimmsnarl with Trick Room Draining Kiss Audino. This is one of the things I had in mind when I originally swapped the Rapidash out for Audino. pretty straightforward, pretty self-explanatory. This was kind of the one way that I could use offensive Grimmsnarl before I got Crobat. Like I mentioned, Grimmsnarl was the one Pokemon on this draft that I had used before, and I'd used it in MBC, and we maxed it a few times, and each time it was two of those were under Trick Room. One of them was actually under Tailwind. We had a very different team composition, but Trick Room with Grimmsnarl was pretty nice against teams that didn't necessarily have a Trick Room mode, or maybe you just bring it as an option in case you get to Team Preview and you see that your opponent didn't bring their Trick Room mode, that kind of thing. Just never found the right opportunity for it. Next one is Weakness Policy Celesteela with Volt Switch Raichu. This is one that I think we should all be surprised that I didn't use, because it seems like a no-brainer. This is like one of the first things I thought about when I knew I wanted Celesteela Raichu. And I did actually bring this as a potential combination against John in Week 8. Raichu was just a very secondary piece to that team, so it wasn't something that actually hit the field. So I listed it here for that. It's a very common combination that you saw in like VGC Series 9 and 7 and 9. So, but it didn't really seem that great, especially when I had amazing Fake Tears support from Grimmsnarl, and it also works a lot better when you have a redirector on the team, so you can Volt Switch out and go into a redirector, kind of like the Pelipper thing I was talking about. The last one is Defog Crobat. So Defog is something that it's a very niche move. It's not something you're gonna see very often. I don't think it's like a big selling point on Crobat. I really just listed it here because in the very, very early stages of prep against Ryan in finals, I had actually kind of sort of considered Defog Crobat with Head Smash Archeops, which can one-shot a Dynamax Moltres. I think I probably put a boosting item on the Archeops, I don't remember. I didn't hang on to the idea for too long because it was kind of wacky, or maybe not kind of, it was just weird. It was probably more of a meme than a real strategy, but Defog is fun on something fast like Crobat, because if you've got some really powerful low accuracy moves, you can Defog. It's spread. It lowers the evasion on both targets, and it allows you to use some high risk, low accuracy moves a little bit more reliably. Maybe you could stick a Hypnosis onto Defog Crobat as well if you really want to. But that was just a fun little thing I thought I would mention. But yeah, that is it. So I am our first 2-time MDL champion. I am not 100% sure if I'll be back in season 4 to defend the title, but I will be at least during the draft. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, I did not expect to win the season. Definitely did not. Even getting everything I wanted out of my Celesteela team comp, I didn't go into the season thinking, all right, I'm going to defend my title and I'm gonna take it all home again. But I'm very glad that I did. So, overall reflections for the season. A lot of this boils down to me kind of surprising myself. I had a team with it was a very competent team composition, but it was full of pieces that I had never used before. The only Pokemon on there that I have a history with in VGC or draft, at least in Generation 8, I should say, was the Grimmsnarl. Everything else was very new to me, and it worked really, really well. I had the rule against redirection because I felt like I was super, super reliant on my Clefable on my Season 2 draft. So I wanted to branch out a little bit more, and I wanted to force myself to be comfortable with another style of team. I also decided pretty much once the Snorlax Cofagrigus thing was off the table during the draft, I pretty much decided, okay, you know what? I think I'm actually gonna not go with a hard Trick Room mode, because I usually I have a tendency to do that, or I should say past tense. I had a tendency to do that when I got down to kind of the middle tiers. Usually, like tier 3 is where you want to pick up like a big Trick Room setter and a Trick Room sweeper. But this sort of taught me that you don't have to do that, and you can actually still succeed and have a strong Trick Room matchup if you find some other way to be able to function in Trick Room and to stop Trick Room and all of that. You can still make it work without a hard Trick Room mode, because I had the Cursola, but I brought it once and it wasn't very reliable, especially because I didn't have any redirection to help set the Trick Room up. The fake out with the Raichu in week 5 it helped a lot, and I liked the script that I had written for myself for that mode, but it was the Trick Room mode was not a huge part of my team. I mostly just relied on other people's Trick Room modes not being able to break through stuff like Grimmsnarl, Celesteela. So that was a good lesson to learn. In future drafts, I'm not going to feel so much like I have to get a Trick Room mode. If I get a good one, cool. If I don't, like, I can figure out another way to make it work. It's fine. As for my season predictions, I've said like once or twice already, I did not expect to win this season. I was actually pretty confident that I knew how playoffs were going to go. The top 4 matches were no surprise. I fully expected it to be me and Dan in top 4 and Ryan and Maxwell in top 4. But if I were a betting man, I would have told you my money goes on Dan and Maxwell winning in top 4 instead of me and Ryan. And then after that, I don't know, may have been a toss-up, but I'd probably put my money on Dan to win that one. Not that Maxwell couldn't, because he absolutely could. It wouldn't have surprised me to see that match go either way. But yeah, I figured I would make playoffs, especially with the season that I was having. But winning was not on my radar really until I made finals. But yeah, it ended up working out quite a bit better than I expected. So that's my season. That's season 3. Moving on to MDL season 4. Now I am not playing in the beginning of this season, at least. Oops. I may end up taking over later, but I have some other draft-related responsibilities to take care of. I've joined joined Jinfurai's High Roller League, so I'm playing in that right now. We are in the middle of week 3 at the time of my recording this. So Anthony is going to be taking my spot, at least for the beginning of MDL season 4. He and I are still going to be drafting together, but beyond that, we're not going to be collaborating at all for team building, weekly prep, battling, and all of that. That's going to be 100% him to start off with. Once I finish my run in the High Rollers League, however far I take it, I may end up taking over for him, just using the same team. So I may or may not be back. We will see, but I will at least be drafting, so I have some thoughts on the draft at least. We have a bit of a different format this time. We're allowing transfer moves, and we're allowing mythical Pokemon. Not all of them. Stuff like Magearna is banned. But we have a lot of new, powerful, interesting stuff on the board. I'd be really excited to use any of those. We've got some restricted legendaries like, Zygarde and Zamazenta and that kind of stuff. We've got some cool mythicals, Mew, Jirachi, Melmetal, Genesect, all of that. I would probably like to draft one of those. If not, that's okay. I can do something else as long as I'm drafting, of course, with a partner this time, so it's not all about what I want, but I'm definitely looking at continuing on with drafting something I'm less familiar with. I would also like to probably not draft a Tier 1 Steel type, because both of my MDL wins have been with Tier 1 Steel types, first with Metagross and now Celesteela. But I can't guarantee that I'm not going to do that, because I'm definitely very interested in a lot of the new mythicals and legendaries, and we have some cool Steel types added to the roster, like Melmetal, Genesect, Jirachi. If there's other stuff I want more than those, but if one of those falls to me and the other stuff is not there, then I have no qualms about picking up one of those three, so it could happen. When it comes to transfer moves, that's mostly relevant when it comes to redirection. There's a lot more redirectors now, like Kanto, Mr. Mime, Electabuzz, Electivire, Magmar, Magmortar, Pichu, Pikachu, and Raichu, both Raichus. All of those get Follow Me now. There's maybe a couple more. Riolu and Lucario. So there's a lot of redirectors with transfer moves. This past season, I made it a rule for myself not to take any redirectors. They're so plentiful this time that I'm not going to stick to that. I'm not going to go after redirection so hard as like I did in like I've done in previous drafts, MDL or otherwise. But if redirection looks good with what I have after a couple rounds and it looks, makes sense for the team, then yeah, I'll pick it up. But it's not going to be a priority like it used to be, I think. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for my draft, and the semi kind of restrictions I'm setting for myself. It's a little bit hard to have the same kind of restrictions when we have a new format like that, but. Anyway, that'll be it for me. This breakdown went absurdly long, but that's fine. I said everything I wanted to say. Good games to everybody I played this season, and I look forward to at least watching from the sidelines in Season 4. I will still be doing content for Season 4, even if I'm not playing. If I do take over for Anthony partway through the season, I look forward to playing you guys. So that's going to be it for me. Good luck in the next season, and see you guys later. Peace.